Kenichi finishes another video game and feels completely disappointed. He removes his headset and complains that the game was absolute garbage and way too easy. He desperately wants a game that takes 10 years to beat. He searches online for hardcore games with terrible balancing. He suddenly finds a strange prompt for a never-ending game set in a fantasy world of swords and magic. He checks the difficulty settings and skips past the easy and normal options. He spots a hell mode option and reads the details. The description claims it requires 100 times more experience points to level up compared to normal mode. The game warns that regret is the least of his worries and he will be faced with utter despair. Kenichi thinks this sounds like a great challenge and laughs at the warning. He looks at the character classes and sees options like Swordsman, Spear User, and Swordmaster. He even sees a Demon Lord class. He eventually chooses the Summoner class because it has an insanely high difficulty rating of 8 stars. The game warns him that choosing this class defaults his social status to a lowly serf. Kenichi accepts the terms and clicks yes to start the game. A blinding light erupts from his computer monitors and engulfs his entire room. His consciousness floats through a strange digital space filled with rising bubbles. He wakes up and immediately feels warm and comfortable. He then realizes he is being squeezed too tightly. He starts crying and opens his eyes to see a rustic wooden ceiling. A man and a woman look down at him with huge smiles. The woman rests in bed while the man happily holds him. Kenichi realizes he has been literally reincarnated as a baby. The man announces that he will name the baby Alan. Kenichi accepts his new identity as Alan. He notices his parents are extremely poor and wear tattered clothes. His father is named Rodan and his mother is named Teresia. They live in a small pioneer village where serfs work the land to pay taxes to a local lord. Alan spends his first year just acting like a normal baby. He eats mushy orange food from a wooden spoon and gets his diapers changed. He quickly picks up the local language because it sounds exactly like Japanese. He constantly tries to access his summoner abilities but nothing works. One night after his parents go to sleep, Alan decides to try again. He reaches his hands into the air and commands his status window to open. A massive black grimoire suddenly materializes out of thin air. It glows with a bright blue light and drops right onto his chest. He panics and tells the book to go away. His parents wake up from the noise and rush over to check on him. They assume he is just talking in his sleep and go back to bed. Alan waits for them to fall asleep again before summoning the book back. He successfully opens the grimoire and finally checks his stats. He sees his name is Alan and he is a level 1 summoner. His stats are incredibly low, with his health at 4 and his magic at 2. He checks his available skills and sees he has a summon skill and a create skill. He also notices an apology letter attached to his profile. The letter is from Elmea, the god of creation. The god apologizes for the delay in delivering the grimoire. The message explains that the summoner class is still in the alpha testing phase and the paperwork took a long time to process. Alan ignores the excuse and decides to summon his first monster. He commands an insect to appear but absolutely nothing happens. He gets confused and realizes he has to figure out the game mechanics completely on his own since there are no walkthroughs in this world. He deduces that he needs to use the create skill first. He targets a small bug on the window and uses his create ability. The grimoire generates a rank H insect card. He then uses the summon command on the new card. A massive green grasshopper pops out of the book. Alan names the grasshopper Denka. He checks Denka's stats in the grimoire. He discovers that simply holding the summon card gives him a permanent buff to his endurance and agility. He gets incredibly excited about this hidden mechanic. His loud cheering wakes up his mother. She comes over to check on him and sees the giant grasshopper on the floor. She screams in terror and instantly stomps the bug to death. Alan mourns the loss of his first summon but quickly gets back to grinding. Several days pass. Alan continues to test his skills. He creates a rank H beast card. He summons a small white mouse and names it Mousy. He realizes these low-level summons are completely useless in an actual fight. He discovers he can store up to 10 cards of each creature type in his inventory. He stocks up on 10 mouse cards and instantly gains a massive boost to his attack power. He realizes he is now vastly stronger than any normal baby. He gets hyped about his newfound strength, but remembers he is playing on hell mode. He knows leveling up will be an absolute nightmare. His father Rodan returns home one afternoon covered in blood. Teresia panics but Rodan assures her he is not hurt. He explains he just returned from a monster hunt. Rodan takes Alan outside to show off his catch. A group of village men are butchering a massive great boar in the middle of a dirt clearing. Alan sees the giant white tusks and realizes monsters in this world are incredibly dangerous. A blonde man named Gerda greets them. Gerda has a daughter named Krina who is the exact same age as Alan. Gerda mentions that the Great Boar is a C-rank monster and it takes at least 20 grown men to defeat just one. Alan uses this information as a benchmark for his own power scaling. Roden points up at the sky and shows Alan a flock of alba heron birds. He explains that these birds fly wherever they want. Roden reveals he named Alan after the alba heron, in the hopes that his son can one day escape the brutal life of a serf and be truly free. Alan deeply appreciates his father's words. 10 long months pass. Alan turns 1 year and 10 months old. He continues to grind his abilities every single day. He eventually reaches level 2 for his summon and create skills. The system notifies him that he has unlocked an expansion slot and a new fusion skill. His grimoire also gets a new memo feature to help him keep track of his crazy stats. He realizes he can now create G-rank summons. He tries to fuse 2 of his mice together to make a stronger beast. The system immediately rejects the command. A prompt tells him he does not have enough magic points to perform the fusion. He realizes he completely drained his MP pool just by summoning the mice. He waits until dinner and eats as much food as possible to recover his energy. He tries the fusion again but gets the exact same error message. He discovers his maximum MP capacity is still too low to perform the action. He gets incredibly frustrated by the brutal difficulty curve of Hell mode. Time passes again and Alan turns 3 years old. He stands outside his house and checks his updated status board. He finally has enough MP to use his fusion skill. He combines a beast card and an insect card. A blinding light erupts from his grimoire and produces a brand new G-rank bird card. He summons a small blue bird and names it Chappie. He checks Chappie's stats and sees it has a special voice mimic ability. Chappie perfectly imitates Alan's voice. Alan realizes this skill will be incredibly useful for tricking enemies in the future. He also summons a crowned frog named Pianta and a mole named Molly. He orders Pianta to use a provoke skill. He orders Molly to dig holes in the ground. Molly instantly creates a massive crater. Alan figures he can use these abilities to set traps for monsters. He realizes the key to dominating this world is understanding and stacking all the different stat buffs from his summons. He absolutely loves the extreme depth and complexity of the game mechanics. He claims this is true hardcore gaming. His excitement is suddenly cut short when his neighbor Krena arrives. Krena challenges him to a game of dueling knights. Alan grabs a wooden sword and accepts the challenge. He complains internally because he hates doing physical activities. He assumes his massive stat buffs will easily give him the victory. They charge at each other in the dirt clearing. Krena moves with blinding speed. Alan can barely track her movements even with all his agility buffs. They clash swords multiple times. Krena swings her weapon with terrifying force. She completely overwhelms Alan and smashes his wooden sword into tiny splinters. Alan falls to the ground in total shock. He realizes Krena is ridiculously overpowered for a normal 3-year-old girl. Krena laughs and runs off to get another sword. Roden and Teresia return from the fields carrying heavy baskets of harvested potatoes. Teresia is now heavily pregnant with her second child. Alan immediately jumps up and offers to carry the heavy baskets for his mother. He insists he is strong enough to do the farm work. Roden laughs and tells Alan to just enjoy his childhood. He explains that working the fields as a serf is absolute torture. He refuses to let his young son suffer through the grueling labor before he absolutely has to. Alan accepts this but decides to keep training in secret. He starts throwing heavy rocks at the trees behind his house. He hopes to unlock new combat skills outside of his summoner class. Roden catches him throwing the rocks. Alan lies and says he is just practicing to protect his pregnant mother from forest monsters. Roden finds this incredibly brave and praises his son. Teresia smiles and mentions the upcoming appraisal ceremony. She explains that every child attends this divine ceremony when they turn 5 years old. The ceremony determines a person's innate talent. Teresia hopes Alan gets a powerful talent so he can escape their life of serfdom. Alan takes note of this ceremony and wonders what kind of talent he might actually get. Winter quickly arrives and blankets the village in deep snow. Alan stands outside in the freezing cold and tests the limits of his summons. He watches Denka the grasshopper jump around in a snowy crater. He confirms that his summons can remain active for an entire day without draining extra MP. He considers this a massive breakthrough for his combat strategy. Krena suddenly runs up behind him carrying a giant wooden mallet. She challenges him to another duel. They fight in the snow. Krena easily knocks Alan face first into a snowbank. Roden returns home carrying a large basket of supplies. Teresia walks outside to greet him. Denka the grasshopper accidentally jumps onto Teresia's leg. She screams in terror. The sudden shock causes her to immediately go into labor. Roden panics and tries to help her inside. He yells at Krena to go fetch her parents. Krina runs as fast as she can through the snowy forest. Rodin carries Teresia into their bedroom and lays her down on the bed. He completely panics because he has no idea how to deliver a baby. Alan tries to help by blowing air into the floor heater to keep the room warm. He desperately wishes he had played a medical simulator game in his past life. Krina finally returns with her parents. Gerda and his wife Matilda burst through the door. Matilda takes total control of the situation. She orders all the men to get out of the house immediately. Rodin, Gerda, and Alan wait outside in the freezing snow. They huddle under thick yellow blankets against the stone wall of the house. Hours pass as they listen to Teresia screaming inside. The screaming eventually stops and is replaced by the sound of a crying baby. Rodin rushes back inside. Matilda holds up a healthy newborn baby boy. The entire family gathers around the bed to celebrate. Teresia looks completely exhausted but incredibly happy. She asks Rodin to name their new son. Rodin proudly announces that the baby will be named Mash. Teresia warns him not to name another child after a dangerous monster. Rodin nervously laughs and avoids the question. Alan stands next to his father and looks at his new baby brother. He reflects on his past life as a lonely, miserable gamer. He realizes he actually loves this new life and his new family. He watches his parents smile at baby Mash. Alan clenches his fists and makes a silent vow. He promises to figure out how to master his summoner class. He swears he will max out all of his stats and defeat any monster in his path. He determines that he will use his hardcore gaming skills to free his entire family from the miseries of serfdom. Alan asks his father Rodin about the appraisal ceremony as they walk down a dirt path surrounded by yellow crops and green trees. Rodin explains that everyone has to participate when they turn 5 years old and that getting a talent could help them rise out of serfdom. He adds that there are a lot of rivals because of a recent baby boom in the settlements. Krina rides on the shoulders of her father Gerda, and she excitedly points out all the houses as they approach the commoner village. Alan hopes to get appraised as a swordswoman so he can become a knight, but Krina reminds him that she is the one who wants that class. As they enter the village square, Alan notices that the commoners are dressed much better than their ragged serf clothes. Some villagers point out Alan and mock his dark hair and dark eyes, but Alan ignores them and accepts his serf status. The large wooden doors of the cathedral open and 3 robed officials welcome the crowd inside. The head official announces that Elmea, the god of creation, blesses everyone equally, and that many famous heroes in their country's history originally started as serfs. Alan remembers his past life as a hardcore gamer and realizes that these lore details perfectly match the game's class progression system, where top-tier classes like Hero and Sword Lord require starting from the bottom of the social ladder. The villagers gather inside the grand hall and face a large altar featuring a statue of Elmea. Alan looks at a glowing magical prompt that only he can see, which is an apology letter from the developers explaining that his chosen class is still in testing and no cancellations are allowed. He gets annoyed at the memory of the devs but stays quiet as the head official begins the ceremony. The village chief Deboji is called forward with his young son Palomas. The official instructs Palomas to place his hand on a glowing blue crystal ball resting on a pedestal so his talents and attributes can be inscribed on a large black slab. Palomas nervously touches the orb and the slab displays his new talent as a merchant along with his stats, which are all ranked as E. Deboji tearfully hugs his son and celebrates the fact that Palomas received any talent at all. Alan watches this and figures out that attributes in this world are displayed as letter ranks instead of numbers. A cocky kid named Dagora goes next and confidently touches the crystal ball. The slab reveals his talent as an axe user and shows that he has an A rank in attack power. Dagora celebrates loudly and his father praises him while the official notes that this is the first A rank they have seen all day. The official then calls Krena to the front of the hall. Krena touches the blue orb and it immediately emits a blinding horizontal beam of light that shocks everyone in the room. The official looks terrified and announces that a miracle has occurred because Krena possesses the Sword Lord talent, which is one of the highest ranking classes in existence. Gerda wildly cheers for his daughter and repeatedly chants her new title while Krena pouts and complains that she wanted to be a swordswoman instead. Alan realizes that Krena's ultra-rare class perfectly explains why she has been so ridiculously overpowered during their playfights. Finally, the official calls Alan to the pedestal. Alan hopes that his parents will finally learn that he is a summoner. He places his hand on the crystal ball and it glows brightly for a second before completely fizzling out. Alan falls to the floor in confusion and Rodin rushes over to help him up. Rodin asks the official to read the results on the black slab since they cannot read the text themselves. The official hesitates and looks extremely concerned before announcing that Alan has absolutely no talent. Alan looks at the slab and sees that all his stats are E rank and his talent name is just a jumbled string of glitched text. He instantly realizes that the game developers failed to debug the text for his alpha testing class, and he becomes furiously angry in his head. He curses the devs for ruining his chance to reveal his summoner class, but he hides his gamer rage and pretends to cry like a normal child. Rodin comforts Alan and carries him out of the church to head back home. They reunite with Alan's mother Teresia, who is holding his baby brother Mash on a scenic dirt path. Back inside their humble stone house, the parents sit by the fire and tell Alan that talents do not matter because he will always be their pride and joy. Mash playfully pinches Alan's cheek and Alan feels genuinely happy to be part of such a loving family despite their extreme poverty. Later that night, Alan lies awake on his futon while his brother sleeps. He summons his black grimoire and analyzes his E-rank attributes. He remembers the specific rules of Hell mode, which require 100 times more experience points to level up compared to a normal playthrough. He deduces that his letter ranks are simply displaying the heavily handicapped growth rate of his difficulty setting. He accepts the brutal challenge and vows to spend his life proving that hardcore gaming is superior to everything else. He still plans to complain to the devs about the text glitch, but he is determined to dominate the world anyway. The next day, the village holds a celebration for Krina at Gerda's house. Chief Deboji gifts them a large jug of celebratory liquor. Gerda offers the first drink to Rodin, but Rodin refuses because Gerda has been acting grumpy all day. Gerda snaps and yells that Krena's extraordinary talent means she can join the knighthood and eventually become a noble, so she should not waste her time socializing with lowly serfs anymore. Rodin gets furious that Gerda wants to cut ties with her family and violently grabs Gerda by the collar. The two men start a massive physical brawl in the middle of the room while Alan and Krina watch while eating bread rolls. Teresia and Matilda step in and simultaneously punch their husbands in the face to end the fight. The two men apologize and sit back down to share the liquor. Matilda explains to the kids that the four adults are actually childhood friends who moved to this pioneer village 10 years ago and built their identical houses together. Gerda and Rodin reminisce about constructing the roofs and support beams, and they quickly forgive each other as they get drunk. The following morning, Gerda and Rodin are working in the fields when they hear that the Royal Order of Knights has arrived to see Krena. The villagers gather in the town square and Dagora tries to bully Alan by calling him a talentless weakling. Krena steps between them and fiercely defends Alan until Gerda pulls her back. The knights ride into the square on horseback led by an older scarred man named Captain Zenoff and a younger blonde man named Vice Captain Leibrand. Chief Deboji respectfully greets the knights, but Zenoff immediately demands to know if they falsified the appraisal results to fool the local baron. Gerda begs for mercy and explains that Krina is only 5 years old and has never held a real sword. Zenoff states that falsifying an appraisal is punishable by death and declares that they must hold a fencing duel to prove Krina's talent. He threatens to execute Krina and her entire family on the spot if she refuses to fight. Alan thinks these rules are completely insane, but Krina happily accepts the challenge and grabs a massive silver sword from one of the soldiers. Leibrand steps forward with his own weapon and accepts her challenge. Krina declares herself a knight and leaps into the air to strike Leibrand. Leibrand blocks the attack, but the sheer force of the blow creates bright yellow sparks and pushes him back. They clash swords rapidly, and the villagers watch in awe as Krina swings the heavy weapon with ease. Alan calculates that Krina's sword mastery skill is already at level 5 thanks to their daily play fighting, but he worries that an adult knight still has a massive advantage in base stats. Krina slides across the dirt and embeds herself into a stone wall while yelling with excitement. Gerda panics and tries to run to his daughter, but the silver-armored knights tackle him to the ground and pin him against a wooden structure. Krina charges forward again and a radiant green aura surrounds her body. Leibrand realizes she is using an extra skill and braces for impact. Krina swings her sword and unleashes a massive explosion of radiant yellow light that completely blinds the vice captain. When the light fades, Krina holds her blade directly between Leibrand's eyes and he falls to the ground in total defeat. Captain Zenoff quickly intervenes and declares that the duel is over. Krina lowers her weapon and thanks Leibrand for the fun fight while calling him a grandpa. Leibrand hangs his head in shame and mutters that he is only 24 years old. The villagers erupt into massive cheers, and Gerda breaks free from the guards to scoop Krina into his arms. Zenoff approaches Gerda and formally apologizes for his boorish behavior. He commends Gerda for raising a true sword lord and invites the family to the chief's house to discuss Krina's future. The group relocates to Deboji's dining room and sits around a large table filled with food. Dagora shoves food into his face while Krina happily eats fruit. Xenoph announces that the local baron has officially decided to rename the settlement to Krina Village in honor of her talent. Deboji nervously accepts the name change. Xenoph explains that 3 years ago a noble family faked an appraisal to claim their child was a sword lord, but the child was later exposed as an ordinary swordsman. This incident forced the kingdom to strictly verify all high-ranking talents with live combat tests. He assures Gerda that Krina will be sent to the academy when she turns 12 so she can train to serve the royal family directly. Alan listens closely and learns that the academy is a place for talented individuals to become official knights. Xenoph also encourages Dagora to study hard so he can earn admission to the academy with his axe user talent. Dagora agrees and immediately starts an argument with Krina by calling Alan too stupid to pass any exams. Krina yells back and defends Alan's intelligence while Alan simply smiles and ignores the childish bickering. Xenoph notices Alan's dark hair and asks who he is. Rodin introduces Alan as his son. Xenoph suddenly recognizes Rodin's name and calls him a legendary hero. He explains that the Baron absolutely loves the great boar meat that the village supplies every winter and that everyone knows Rodin is the brave hunter who takes on the most dangerous role during the hunts. Rodin is completely shocked by the praise and humbly thanks the captain. Later that evening, Rodin and Alan walk together through a forest dirt path under a golden sunset. Rodin reflects on how even a lowly serf like him can get recognized by the nobility if he works hard enough. He encourages Alan to keep working hard and to be proud of himself no matter what happens. Alan agrees with his father and secretly knows he has to keep grinding his hell mode stats to survive. Rodin then reveals that he snuck some pink slime creatures out of the forest as gifts for Teresia and Mash. Alan laughs and pulls out 2 of his own pink slime summons to show his father that they had the exact same idea. Alan stands in the fields and celebrates because he finally reaches the 3rd level for his summon skill, which unlocks the brand new enhance ability and expands his grimoire capacity. He gets super hyped and hopes to summon a massive dragon, but then he remembers he still has to fuse his basic creatures to unlock better ones first. He also notices his card inventory goes up to 30, which means he can stack even more stat buffs on his body to make himself stronger. He decides to head back inside his family's rustic wooden house to help his pregnant mother clean up the dishes after dinner. His parents sit by the fire pit and discuss the new baby, trying to guess if it will be a boy or a girl. His dad mentions that they need to think of a name, and his mom reminds him that he promised she could name their baby if it turns out to be a girl. Alan suddenly notices that his dad's health and energy are completely full and asks him about a recently healed scar on his arm. His dad flexes his muscles and explains that he passed a trial of the gods during a boar hunt. He describes it as a sudden burst of energy that instantly heals all wounds and fatigue. Alan immediately recognizes this as the world's version of leveling up and realizes that his father must be a pretty high level by now. However, Alan checks his own stats and sees he is still stuck at level 1 because he has never actually defeated any monsters to gain experience points. He knows that serfs are strictly forbidden from leaving the village without permission, with hunting being the only exception. He asks his father if he can join the next hunt to gain some experience, but his dad sternly refuses and warns him that hunting is incredibly dangerous and often costs people their lives. Later that night, Alan sits on his futon while his little brother sleeps and opens his magical black grimoire to check his status screen. He reads an oracle message from the creation god Elmea and realizes the game developers finally fixed the glitchy text on his profile after he sent them multiple toxic complaints. He discovers he actually has S-rank intelligence and magic points, which perfectly suits his summoner class. He feels satisfied with his stats because they match the high potential of Crayon's Swordlord class, even though he is playing on the extremely grind-heavy Hell mode. He decides to test out his new enhanced skill and targets his insect summon, a large grasshopper named Denka. He figures out that the enhanced skill directly boosts the creature's agility and endurance, but it does not increase the passive buffs that Alan receives from holding the card. He summons Denka to see the physical changes and notices the bug looks much stronger even without growing in size. He realizes being a summoner requires deep strategy and not just relying on giant monsters. He proudly shows the giant grasshopper to his pregnant mother, but she gets totally grossed out and yells at him to put the bug away. He immediately unsummons it, and the grasshopper dissolves into floating lights. The next morning, his father heads out for a hunting trip, carrying his spear and a large sack while the family waves goodbye. Alan gets back to his chores and hangs up the laundry in the yard while continuing his fusion experiments. He combines insect and beast cards but fails to unlock a new category. He then tries fusing an insect and a bird card, hoping for a breakthrough. The fusion succeeds and he receives a grass-type card. He feels incredibly confused about how a patch of grass can be considered a summonable creature. However, he checks the stats and gets extremely excited because the grass card provides a massive boost to his magic points and luck. He realizes this extra mana will allow him to perform way more actions throughout the day and drastically speed up his leveling process. He summons the creature, which turns out to be a small red plant with vine limbs and a single leaf on its head. He names the little plant Apo and checks its special ability, seeing it has a skill called Aroma. He orders Apo to use the skill, and the little plant burrows into the dirt, leaving only its green leaf exposed. A pink mist sprays into the air, and suddenly a small green sapling rapidly sprouts out of the ground. Alan feels incredibly disappointed because he thinks the skill is useless and complains that he is turning into a magical gardener. His mother walks out into the yard and praises the lovely smell of the new sapling. Alan panics and tries to unsummon Apo, but the plant refuses to revert back into a card. He realizes the sapling is now a permanent fixture in their yard and wonders if the plant has any practical use in combat. Later, Alan spars with Krenna in the yard using wooden swords. She completely overpowers him, and he ends up flat on his back in the dirt. He feels frustrated that he still cannot beat her, even with his increased stats and his sword mastery skill reaching level 3. Krenna compliments him and says he feels a bit tougher, but Alan knows he still has a long way to go. He considers using the attack skill from his wolf summon to get an edge, but decides against using lethal force on his friend. Later in the afternoon, Alan tries to level up his throwing skill by tossing small stones into a hollowed-out tree trunk. He complains to his little brother Mash that he has thrown over 20,000 stones without leveling up once. Mash complains about being bored, and Alan realizes he is wasting his time. He decides to abandon his throwing practice and focus entirely on leveling up his summoner class instead. He notes that Apo's Aroma skill actually shortens his mana recovery time, which allows him to summon more often, but he still feels like he is progressing too slowly. That night, a severe rainstorm hits the village. Alan and his mother wait anxiously by the fire because his father is late coming home. Suddenly, they hear shouting outside. They rush out into the rain and see several hunters carrying his father on a wooden stretcher. Rodin is covered in severe bruises and has a massive bloody wound on his chest from a boar's tusk. The men bring him inside and explain that they managed to save his life by using a rare healing item called a Muellerze flower. The knights had given Rodin the flower along with some gold coins as an apology for the previous incident with Krenna. One of the hunters angrily blames the commoners for the disaster. Mash starts crying, and Alan gently leads his little brother away to comfort him while the adults talk. A burly blonde hunter stays behind to explain the situation to Alan and his mother. He tells them that the village chieftain forced the hunters to let commoners join the boar hunt because boar meat is highly valuable and can be traded for essential winter supplies like salt and firewood. The commoners normally never join the hunts because it is too dangerous, but they felt safe this time because a royal knight had previously called Rodin a legendary hero. The commoners assumed Rodin would easily protect them. During the hunt, the hunters gave the commoners the simple task of distracting the massive boar. However, when the terrifying monster actually charged out of the woods, the commoners completely panicked and broke formation. One young commoner tripped and fell, forcing Rodin to step in and take the boar's attack head-on to save the boy's life. The other hunters barely managed to kill the beast afterward. The blonde hunter promises to bring Rodin's share of the meat the next day and tells Alan to stay strong for his family. Alan feels incredibly guilty and realizes he has been treating his new life like a video game. He understands that the people in this world are fighting a brutal battle for survival every single day. He vows to stop focusing solely on his own power and promises to protect his little brother and his pregnant mother. Rodin eventually wakes up and the family shares a tearful reunion. The burly hunter returns with a large bundle of boar meat wrapped in leaves and tells Rodin to focus on his recovery. Rodin apologizes for being a burden, but Alan steps up and promises to keep the family safe. The next day, Alan decides to stop hiding his true physical strength. He goes to the village well and easily carries 2 massive wooden buckets of water on his shoulders, shocking the adult villagers. He figures that since Krenna is already famous as a sword lord, no one will care if a talentless serf like him shows a little extra strength. He reallocates all his magical buffs into purely physical stats to maximize his labor efficiency. He helps the burly hunter harvest a massive crop of potatoes, effortlessly ripping long chains of the heavy vegetables straight out of the dirt. The hunter is amazed by his strength and remarks that the Baron will take more than half of their harvest, leaving them desperate for more food to survive the winter. Later, the young commoner who ruined the hunt comes to their house to apologize. He bows deeply and brings a basket of fresh fruit as a peace offering. Alan feels annoyed by the boy's incompetence, but Rodin calmly forgives him and reminds everyone that they all have families to return to. A group of other hunters arrives to check on Rodan, and Alan feels incredibly grateful to have such a supportive community and loving parents. Determined to secure more food for the winter, Alan heads out into the tall grass near the village to hunt wild ducks. He uses his grimoire to summon several colorful frogs equipped with tiny golden crowns. He sets up a series of wicker baskets propped up by sticks and string, planning to use the frog's provoke skill to lure ducks into his traps. He hides in the bushes and pulls the strings. The frogs fail to attract any ducks. Suddenly, a massive shadow falls over the field. A giant white bird with purple wings and a red crest swoops down and lands on his traps. Alan recognizes the creature as an alba heron, a dangerous B-rank monster. He realizes the frogs lured a deadly predator instead of a simple duck. He knows he should run away, but he decides to act like a true hardcore gamer and takes on the massive monster to secure enough food for his family to survive the harsh winter. He draws his wooden practice sword and charges blindly through the tall grass. He leaps into the air and strikes the giant bird directly on its back, sending feathers flying everywhere. However, the alba heron easily brushes off the attack and swats Alan directly in the face with its massive yellow claw. Alan crashes hard into the dirt. Realizing he cannot win with pure physical strength, he uses his grimoire to summon his wolf pack. A group of fierce gray wolves bursts out of a thick white mist and instantly surrounds the giant bird. The wolves bite into the bird's neck and back, but the alba heron unleashes a massive burst of glowing blue magical energy. The shockwave instantly vaporizes the wolves and completely destroys Alan's wooden sword. Alan picks up the broken pieces of his weapon and tries to attack again, but the bird effortlessly knocks him to the ground. He clutches his side in agonizing pain and realizes that every time one of his summoned creatures dies, he loses the stat buffs associated with that card. The loss of his buffs leaves him drastically weaker than before. The massive alba heron looms over him and screeches aggressively, leaving Alan completely defenseless on the ground as he realizes he might actually die. Alan lies on his back in the grassy field, desperately pushing a wooden cross weapon against the beak of the massive alba heron. The giant bird screeches and tries to crush him, but Alan refuses to give up. He quickly realizes his only chance to survive is to cripple the monster first. He uses his grimoire to summon two orange, multi-eyed insect creatures he calls Sucker and Denka. He commands the bugs to latch onto the bird's neck and use their energy drain attack. The bugs bite deep into the white feathers, and the giant bird shrieks in pain as its energy is rapidly sapped. Seeing the monster weaken, Alan immediately summons his wolf pack, Fido. The fierce wolves leap through the air and tear into the bird's flesh. With the beast distracted and crippled, Alan grabs his wooden weapon, leaps high into the air and delivers a brutal strike straight to the bird's head. Blue electricity surges from the impact, and the massive monster finally collapses. A floating black book materializes next to Alan, displaying a notification that he has defeated his first alba heron and gained 100 experience points. Alan completely exhausts himself but celebrates his flawless victory, thrilled to finally experience the rush of taking down a real monster. He hauls the giant bird back to his family's home, completely shocking his father, Rodan, his mother, Teresia, his little brother Mash, and his friend, Krenna. Alan plays dumb and claims the bird just happened to land nearby, so he surprised it and beat it with a wooden stick and some rocks. Gerda, Krena's father, inspects the bird and notices several large bite marks on its neck. He asks Alan if he actually bit the monster himself. Alan panics internally but brushes it off, saying he was just fighting on pure instinct. Later, Gerda helps Alan process the massive bird in the yard. He hangs the carcass from a wooden frame and cuts it open to drain the blood into a trench. Gerda explains that a typical alba heron weighs 60 kilograms, but it drops to 20 after the blood is drained and the meat is dried. Out of that, only about 10 kilograms are actually edible. He also points out that the wings are incredibly valuable, but as serfs, they have to hand over 60% of their hunt to the ruling class as a tax. Gerda mentions that smaller D-rank monsters are usually ignored by the tax collectors, but the alba heron falls under the taxable category. He digs into the bird's flesh with a knife and extracts a small purple crystal called a magic stone. He explains that any magic stone from a monster above D rank also gets taxed. However, Gerda quickly formulates a plan. He points out that the village chief knows Rodan is severely injured, and they can use this tragic situation as leverage to negotiate a better deal for the meat. Alan immediately agrees, and the two head off to see the chieftain. Inside the village chief's large stone residence, Gerda and Alan stand before the wealthy, blonde-haired chieftain. Gerda puts on a spectacular performance, dramatically explaining how Rodan's young son had to risk his life to catch this monster just to keep his starving family alive. He complains that the Baron's unreasonable demand for more boar meat is the only reason Rodan got hurt in the first place. The chief gets flustered and defensive. Gerda immediately proposes a deal. He offers to hand over the valuable wings and the purple magic stone for the tax, but demands that Alan's family gets to keep all the meat. The chief tries to argue, but Gerda presses harder, pointing out that Rodan's family has 4 mouths to feed and won't survive the winter without this food. Alan plays along perfectly, acting dizzy and pretending to faint from hunger. Gerda catches him and blames the chief for their awful predicament. Feeling the pressure, the chief finally caves and agrees to the deal. However, Alan quickly steps in to secure their future. He asks the chief to confirm that if he ever catches another albaheron, his family can keep the meat while giving up only the wings and magic stones. The chief laughs it off, assuming a little kid could never take down another giant bird, and happily agrees to the terms. Alan gives a mischievous wink, knowing he just secured a massive food supply for his family. With the tax issue resolved, Alan completely commits to his hunting grind. He sets up a new trap in a grassy field near a large crater. He summons 3 colorful frogs wearing small gold crowns and commands them to use their provoke skill. The frogs successfully lure 2 giant albaherons down from the sky. Alan immediately summons his red bug creatures and commands them to drain the bird's energy. The bugs latch onto the monster's necks, causing them to shriek in agony. Alan leaps onto the back of one bird and shoves a large black sphere directly into its beak to silence it. He then summons his wolf pack and orders them to attack. The wolves tear into the weakened birds, and Alan finishes them off with a brutal downward strike from his wooden stick. He successfully takes down both monsters without losing a single summoned creature, achieving a flawless victory. His floating black grimoire updates, showing he earned 200 experience points. His total experience finally reaches the maximum limit of 1,000, and a notification announces that he has leveled up to level 2. He eagerly opens his status menu and sees massive increases across all his attributes, including health, mana, attack, and agility. However, he notices that his stats only increased by 60% of their full potential, realizing he is still constrained by the trial penalty he previously read about. Despite the limitation, he feels incredible because his health and mana are completely restored. He hugs his grimoire in celebration, thrilled to finally experience his first level up after 6 long years in this new world. Alan hauls the 2 massive birds back home and surprises his father, who is tending the fire. He decides it is finally time to come clean to his parents about his newfound strength, though he plans to keep the reincarnation and summoner details a secret. That night, Alan sits his parents down around the fire pit and drops a massive bombshell. He tells them that when he was just 1 year old, the creation god Elmea spoke to him through an oracle. He claims the god blessed him with immense power and wisdom, but also burdened him with incredibly difficult trials that he must overcome. His mother looks terrified, but Alan explains that this divine blessing is the reason he is physically stronger and smarter than a normal kid. Rodan listens intently and connects the dots. He realizes that Alan's rapid healing, including a disappearing scratch on his cheek, must be the reward for passing these trials. Rodan also figures out that the appraisal ceremony ranked Alan so low because his unique talent was too new to the world to be recognized by the system. Alan apologizes for keeping it a secret, explaining he was worried people would misunderstand his abilities. His mother tearfully pulls him into a tight hug, feeling guilty that her son had to fight giant monsters all alone to pass God's trials. Alan promises to face the challenges head-on and use his power to protect the family. Rodan agrees to keep the exact nature of the trials a secret so no one mistakes Alan for a false prophet. However, Rodan happily asks for permission to tell Gerda, completely eager to brag about his son's divine talent just like Gerda brags about Krenna's swordlord abilities. Alan easily agrees to let his dad boast. Time passes, and winter arrives in the village. Alan is now 6 years old and joins his father on his very first trading trip to the local market. As they walk through the snowy streets carrying large green backpacks filled with dried meat, Alan asks Rodan to explain the difference between serfs and commoners. Rodan explains that commoners have a higher social standing and do not have to pay the brutal 60% hunting tax. Instead, they pay a flathead tax of 3 gold coins per adult and 1 gold coin per child every year. Alan asks if a serf can ever become a commoner. Rodan reveals that a serf can buy their freedom by paying a tribute of 10 gold coins for every single family member. Alan quickly calculates the math. With the new baby on the way, his family will have 5 members, meaning he needs exactly 50 gold coins to free them all. They enter a bustling shop to trade their dried boar and albaheron jerky. Alan carefully observes the bartering process. He learns that 1 bundle of jerky trades for 1 bag of salt, 4 malmo fruits, 1 popo fruit, or 4 days worth of firewood. He pulls out his notebook and reviews the currency system. noting that 1 gold coin equals 100 silver coins, which equals 1,000 copper coins and 10,000 iron coins. Since 1 bundle of jerky sells for 1 silver coin, Alan realizes he needs to hunt exactly 500 albaherons to earn the 50 gold coins. Rather than feeling discouraged, his hardcore gamer mindset kicks in, and he views the massive grind as an easy challenge. While in town, Alan visits a sunlit apothecary filled with herbs and glass bottles. He asks the bald shopkeeper for magical potions that restore mana, but the man laughs and says they don't carry anything that fancy. Alan then asks about the Muellerze flower, the rare item that saved his father's life. The shopkeeper immediately gets angry and starts complaining about Gerda. He explains that Gerda burst into the shop a month ago, dropped to his knees, and begged for the flower to save his friend. The flower usually costs 5 gold coins, but Gerda relentlessly haggled the price down to 3 and promised to pay the rest later. Alan feels incredibly moved by Gerda's loyalty. To make up for the shopkeeper's financial loss, Alan places a massive bundle of premium jerky on the counter as a free gift. The shopkeeper is completely stunned and deeply thanks him for the generous tip. Leaving the shop, Alan spots some metallic weapons through a window and gets shocked to see they cost 50 silver coins each, equivalent to 5 albaherons. Suddenly, a freckled boy in an orange shirt named Dogora blocks his path in the street. Dogora comes from a blacksmith family and is Krina's sparring partner. He angrily demands that Alan become his minion. Alan refuses and drops his massive supply bundle to the ground. Dogora charges at him with a wooden club, but Alan quickly pulls out his wooden sword. He effortlessly dodges Dogora's heavy swings and strikes the boy hard on the head, sending him tumbling to the dirt. Alan realizes Dogora hits hard like a true axe user, but his power is nothing compared to Krina's 3-star Sword Lord talent. He leaves the dazed boy on the ground and walks away. A few days later, Dogora goes to Krina's house for his usual training session. He spars with Krina but gets completely destroyed, unable to land a single hit on the pink-haired girl. Meanwhile, Alan's little brother Mash practices with a wooden pole and shows impressive skill, leading Alan to believe Mash might possess a spear user talent. That night, Gerda visits Alan's house, completely healed from his previous injuries. He sits by the fire pit with Rodin, Teresia, and Alan, and delivers some terrible news. The village chief just ordered the hunters to deliver 15 boars this year instead of 10. Because of the extreme quota set by the Baron, the chief demands that commoners must join the hunt again to increase their numbers. Teresia gets furious, completely terrified that Rodin will get hurt again while trying to protect inexperienced commoners. Gerda explains that if they fail to deliver the meat, the Baron will recruit more serfs to the village, which will shrink everyone's farming land and slowly destroy their community. Worse still, the quota will increase to 20 boars next year. The adults feel completely trapped and hopeless. However, Alan steps forward with a confident expression. He tells the adults that his God-given wisdom can solve this massive problem. Drawing on his extensive experience from playing multiplayer online games, he explains that he knows exactly how to integrate low-level newbies into a veteran hunting party so they can safely gain experience without getting everyone killed. He promises he can make the commoners useful and asks the adults to let him take full control of the hunting strategy. Following his plan, Alan, Rodin, and Gerda stand tall on a dirt path at dawn, confidently facing a massive group of nervous commoners gathered at the village gate, fully prepared to lead them into the dangerous forest. The village hunters gather at the main gate, fully prepared for their upcoming mission. Rodin announces that he is completely healed from his previous injuries and is ready to lead the group once again. Alan tags along for the trip, but Rodin strictly orders him to stay out of the way and just observe the hunt. Alan feels a bit disappointed that he cannot directly participate in the fighting, but he knows the main goal today is to train the inexperienced commoners so they can meet the Baron's massive meat quota. The hunting party heads out to the White Dragon Mountains, an area where the boars migrate every fall in search of food. As they reach the hunting grounds, Rodin organizes the men into their assigned teams based on Alan's brilliant strategy. The plan is simple but highly effective. First, the bait team lures a massive brown boar into an open clearing. The giant beast charges aggressively, completely terrifying the inexperienced hunters. However, Rodin commands the tank team to hold their ground. The tank team uses their wooden spears to press against the boar's sides, effectively pinning the struggling monster in place. Once the boar is immobilized, the strike team moves in and repeatedly stabs its vitals until it collapses and dies. Alan explains to the others that his father has used this exact method to hunt safely for over a decade, proving that strategy can easily overcome a lack of raw combat talent. The newbies who landed a strike suddenly feel a massive surge of power coursing through their bodies. They celebrate their victory, believing they have just overcome a divine trial and leveled up. Alan eagerly checks his magical grimoire, hoping to see his own experience points increase. However, he is incredibly frustrated to discover that he gained absolutely 0 experience points. The system does not consider him a participant in the battle just for standing nearby and giving advice. The villagers thank Alan for his amazing tactical planning, but Alan secretly feels bitter about his lack of personal progress. Later, back in the village, Alan speaks with a local butcher near the well. He asks the man to butcher several giant albaharan bird carcasses for him. The butcher is hesitant because he wants to play it safe for his pregnant wife, but Alan offers to pay him 2 packs of meat for every bird he processes. The butcher happily accepts the profitable deal. Alan explains that these birds are not part of the village's food reserves, and he needs them broken down so he can sell the meat at the market. His ultimate goal is to earn 50 gold coins to buy his family's freedom from serfdom, and outsourcing the butchery saves him precious time so he can keep grinding. Meanwhile, the village's hunting operations continue smoothly. By slowly integrating newbies into the veteran teams, they eventually gather enough capable hunters to split into 2 separate groups, effectively doubling their hunting efficiency. Alan wonders why the Baron is so obsessed with gathering boar meat, as the territory does not seem to be suffering from any food shortages. During one of the hunts, a massive boar charges at a blonde youth named Dogora. The team successfully traps the beast, and Dogora, along with the other newbies, strikes the monster down. They all celebrate their newly acquired strength. This time, Alan checks his grimoire and is thrilled to see his experience points shoot up, pushing him to level 3. He happily reveals his secret leveling strategy. Just before the hunters deal a finishing blow to a trapped boar, Alan summons a weak insect creature and places it right in front of the beast. The boar attacks and kills his summon, which technically flags Alan as an active participant in the battle. Thanks to this hardcore gamer loophole, he easily leeches experience points from the hunter's hard work without ever swinging a weapon. 3 months pass, and winter blankets the village in snow. The villagers successfully meet the Baron's quota of 15 boars, largely thanks to Alan's strategic planning. To celebrate the new year, the village chieftain hosts a large gathering and gives Alan a special bottle of liquor as a reward for his amazing contributions. Alan returns to his rustic wooden home with his friend Krena, carrying the liquor and some leftover candies. Inside, Rodan, Teresia, Baby Mash, and Krena's father Gerda are all sitting around the fire pit enjoying a massive feast of grilled meat. The adults praise Alan for saving the village from the Baron's extreme demands. During the meal, Gerda notices the special bottle of liquor and asks about it. Alan proudly explains it is a gift from the chieftain, but Gerda points out that Alan is way too young to drink alcohol. Gerda and Rodan try to claim the liquor for themselves, but Alan sees a perfect opportunity to make a wager. He tells the men they can have the liquor, but only if they manage to beat him in an arm wrestling contest. If Alan wins, they must allow him to wield a spear and actively fight in all the upcoming boar hunts. Gerda and Rodan find the challenge hilarious and immediately agree to the terms, completely underestimating the young boy. Gerda steps up first, promising not to go easy on him. Alan secretly prepares for the match by filling his grimoire inventory with Fido Wolf cards, transferring all their stat buffs directly into his own attack power. Since he is now level 6, he feels incredibly confident. They clasp hands over the wooden table, and Krena eagerly shouts for them to start. The moment the match begins, Gerda strains and sweats profusely, completely shocked by Alan's immense physical strength. Despite his large muscles, Gerda is easily overpowered, and Alan slams his hand onto the table, securing a swift victory. Gerda curses his defeat while Krena cheers for Alan. Alan calculates that Gerda's attack stat must be somewhere between 150 and 200, placing him solidly in the D rank category. Next, it is Rodan's turn. Rodan tells Alan to rest his arm before their match, but Alan insists he is ready. As they clasp hands, Alan notices how massive and calloused his father's hands are, realizing it is physical proof of how hard Rodan works to provide for the family. Alan is determined to prove he is strong enough to be treated like an adult. The match begins, and both of them grit their teeth, straining with all their might. However, Rodan's raw strength proves to be too much, and he eventually pins Alan's arm to the table, winning the contest. Alan graciously accepts his defeat and hands the jug of liquor over to his father. The adults celebrate and toast with their wooden bowls. Alan estimates that Rodan's attack stat must be over 300, making him a powerful C-rank fighter. Rodan comforts Alan, explaining that Alan is not weak, but Rodan is simply too strong. He firmly states that Alan will not be allowed to hunt boars until he can defeat him in a rematch. Alan accepts the condition, confident he can surpass his father once he reaches summon level 4 by the fall. Suddenly, Krena's mother, Matilda, demands more snacks and effortlessly pins Gerda to the floor when he talks back to her. Seeing this, Alan quietly suspects that Matilda might also possess C-rank stats. By June, Alan turns 7 years old and his summon level finally increases. He eagerly checks his grimoire and discovers he has unlocked E-rank summons, including a completely new category of creatures. Furthermore, his card inventory capacity increases by 10, meaning he can stack even more stat buffs. He also notices a brand new fixed skill called Storage. Curious, he tests the skill by pushing a large wooden branch directly into a black square on the grimoire's page. The branch vanishes completely. He then throws a handful of stones into the square, and they also disappear. Checking his item overview, he sees the exact quantities of the stones and wood listed in his mental inventory, confirming that the storage space has no depth limit and can hold an infinite amount of items as long as they fit through the opening. However, Alan finds this massive upgrade extremely suspicious. In his experience with video games, developers usually grant the player a god-tier inventory expansion right before they absolutely need it. He deduces there must be a mechanical reason why he received this skill right now. Eager to test his new creatures, Alan attempts to generate an E-rank insect summon. However, the grimoire informs him that he does not have enough E-rank magic stones to create the creature. Alan is stunned to learn that generating E-rank summons now requires consumable items instead of just mana. He quickly remembers his hidden stash of valuables. He sneaks past his sleeping little brother, pulls up a loose floorboard, and retrieves a small brown sack filled with coins. From the pile, he picks up a small purple crystal. It is a magic stone he harvested from a horned rabbit that wandered into the village a long time ago. He holds the stone and tries to create the insect summon again, but the system gives him the exact same error message. He realizes he is holding the stone in his physical hand, so he tosses the purple crystal into the grimoire's new storage. He tries the spell a third time and it works perfectly. He successfully casts the spell, and a massive, colorful butterfly materializes in the air. The butterfly, an E-rank insect named Agaha, lands on Alan's back, and he notes that it boosts his endurance and agility by 10 points. Teresia hears Alan shouting from the yard and asks what is wrong, but Alan quickly hides the giant butterfly and makes up a silly excuse to avoid getting caught. He then tests the E-rank beast summon, producing a large yellow saber-toothed tiger named Tama. The tiger playfully pins him to the ground and licks his face. Alan notes that Tama also provides a 10-point stat boost, which is double the buff provided by the F-rank summons. He returns the tiger to the book and attempts to fuse the butterfly and the tiger to create an E-rank bird summon. The fusion fails, and the book consumes the cards, confirming Alan's fear that he will need a massive supply of magic stones to experiment and build his army. That evening, as the children sit around the indoor fire pit, Alan asks Rodan if any more horned rabbits have been spotted near the village. Rodan explains that the villagers dug a deep defensive ditch around the perimeter a couple of years ago, which successfully keeps the small, dangerous monsters out. Alan realizes this is a huge problem because he needs to hunt weak monsters to harvest their stones. The next day, Alan trains outside with the other kids. Krenna easily defeats Dogora in a wooden sword sparring match, repeatedly whacking him into the dirt. Alan takes a break and sits under a tree with a smart blonde boy named Pelmoas. Alan asks him for any information regarding magic stones. Pelmoas explains that magic stones are small gems found near a monster's heart and are primarily used to power magical tools in the royal capital. While high-ranking stones are incredibly valuable, Pelmoas reveals that E-rank stones are considered absolute trash and can often be found just lying on the ground. To prove his point, Pelmoas picks up a small purple stone from the dirt and hands it to Alan. Thrilled by this discovery, Alan spends the next several days scavenging the entire village, successfully gathering a massive stockpile of E-rank magic stones with the help of the other villagers. With a full supply of stones stored in his grimoire, Alan finally generates all the available E-rank summons. He creates the butterfly, the saber-toothed tiger, a brown hawk named Hawkins, a small green sprout creature named Beansy, and a massive gray stone golem named Wally. Eager to test their combat capabilities, he heads out to the grassy fields and spots a massive brown boar charging toward him. He commands his hawk to fly up and locate the enemy. As the boar attacks, Alan trips and scratches his arm, but the small green sprout creature immediately uses its glowing leaves to heal his wound completely. The boar charges again, but Alan summons his colorful butterfly, which showers the beast in shimmering pollen, severely debuffing its stats. With the monster weakened, Alan commands his saber-toothed tiger to attack. The massive feline leaps onto the boar and viciously bites into its neck, killing it instantly. Just as Alan celebrates the victory, a second boar bursts from the tall grass and leaps directly at him. Alan quickly summons his giant stone golem, which acts as an impenetrable shield, completely blocking the boar's attack and pinning it to the ground. Standing amidst his diverse team of creatures, Alan finally understands the true design of the summoner class. He realizes that each summon type is specifically tailored to fulfill a core party role. The insects apply debuffs, The beasts handle physical offense, the birds gather intelligence, the grass types provide healing, and the stone types act as defensive tanks. With this incredible lineup, Alan does not need to rely on anyone else. He can fulfill every role of a balanced RPG party all by himself. He also understands exactly why the developers gave him the infinite storage skill at this specific level. It is physically impossible to carry hundreds of magic stones in his pockets, so the storage skill is a necessary tool to fuel his massive, diverse army. Surrounded by his loyal creatures, Alan confidently declares that his unrivaled army can overcome any obstacle, proving that the Summoner class possesses the ultimate power to dominate the world and eventually defeat the Demon Lord. Alan sits with the village leaders as they discuss an upcoming visit from Baron Granvelle. The Baron wants to see their famous boar hunts in person. The village chief and Alan's father, Rodin, ask Alan to be the tour guide because his clever tactics made the hunts successful. Alan initially refuses, thinking it is a waste of time. He just wants to focus on his own leveling so he can eventually earn commoner status and leave the village. However, his father reminds him that the Baron has the authority to instantly grant commoner status to anyone. Hearing this, Alan immediately changes his mind and accepts the job, seeing it as a golden opportunity to escape his life as a serf. Soon the Baron arrives in a fancy carriage accompanied by his daughter Cecil, his butler Sebas, and a powerful knight named Xenoph. The village chief warmly welcomes them and hosts a grand dinner. During the meal, the Baron apologizes for demanding so much boar meat from the village. He explains that a rival noble named Viscount Carnell purposely brought up the village's hunting success in front of the king to put the Baron in a difficult position. Because the king expressed interest, the Baron was forced to demand an absurd amount of meat. The dinner continues, and Cecil expresses her absolute delight over the delicious food. Alan steps up and explains that the dish is made from freshly hunted albaharan meat, seasoned perfectly with local herbs. Xenoph notices Alan's dark hair and eyes and recognizes him as Rodin's son. He assumes Rodin must be a former knight, but the village chief clarifies that Rodin and his family are just ordinary serfs. Upon hearing this, Cecil instantly loses her temper. She furiously yells at the village chief for allowing a lowly serf into the guest hall and treats Alan with extreme disrespect. Her father quickly scolds her, reminding her that serfs are vital members of their territory and deserve to be treated properly. Cecil reluctantly apologizes, but she continues to glare at Alan. Xenoph then challenges Alan, stating that hunting 20 boars in 1 year is a nearly impossible task for commoners. He arrogantly offers to have his elite knights take over the hunts if the villagers fail. However, Alan remains completely unfazed. He confidently tells the knight that 20 boars is actually a very low number. He promises that tomorrow's hunt will easily prove the villagers' superior skills. The next morning, the Baron's group heads out to the forest to watch the hunt. Alan leads them up a tall wooden watchtower so they can safely observe the action from a distance. Cecil complains about the rustic setup, but Alan ignores her. Down below, the village hunters get into position. Alan explains that the frontline fighters are now equipped with sturdy armor crafted from the bones and thick hides of the boars they hunted last year. He thanks the Baron for granting them permission to use the leftover materials. Suddenly, a massive wild boar charges out of the forest, aggressively chasing down the lightly armored bait team. The bait team runs incredibly fast, leading the angry beast perfectly into a sandy clearing. Waiting in the clearing are several hunters holding a massive wooden barrier. As the boar charges in, the hunters slam the barrier against the beast, effectively trapping it. The frontline fighters then push back with all their might, completely immobilizing the monster. Once the boar is pinned, the spear team moves in and repeatedly stabs the creature in its weak spots until it collapses and dies. The execution is flawless, and the boar dies in seconds. Cecil is completely shocked and disgusted by the brutal sight, covering her mouth in horror. Just as the hunters celebrate their quick victory, 3 more wild boars suddenly burst out of the trees, charging right at the bait team. Xenoph panics and immediately orders his knights to step in and save the villagers. However, Alan calmly stops him. He assures the nobles that the hunters are perfectly trained to handle multiple targets. Down in the arena, the hunters do not panic at all. They quickly split into separate groups, perfectly coordinating their movements to isolate the 3 boars. Using the same shield wall tactics, they swiftly trap and eliminate all the remaining beasts without a single casualty. The nobles watch in absolute amazement as the villagers display incredible teamwork and combat efficiency. Alan explains that the villagers used to struggle immensely because they lacked proper armor and weapons. Most of their hard-earned meat was taken as taxes, leaving them with barely anything to survive. However, by mastering this highly efficient shield wall strategy, they managed to minimize injuries and gradually upgrade their equipment over time. This created a snowball effect, allowing them to hunt more effectively and safely. The Baron is incredibly impressed by their performance. Alan casually mentions that the hunters had already killed 7 boars before the Baron even arrived, meaning they only need 10 more to meet the quota. He confidently predicts they will finish the job in just 1 month, rendering the royal knights completely unnecessary. Hearing this, the Baron laughs and applauds their incredible accomplishment. Seizing the moment, Alan makes 2 requests on behalf of the village. First, he asks for permission to construct more wooden shield walls to increase their hunting capacity even further. Second, he asks for permission to trade their excess boar meat for imported liquor. The Baron is confused about the liquor request, but Xenoph completely understands. The knight explains that the hunters risk their lives every day, so having high-quality alcohol is essential for keeping their morale up. The Baron fully agrees with this logic and happily approves both requests. He praises Alan for his brilliant leadership and foresight. However, Cecil immediately gets jealous of the praise. She acts like a total brat, pointing her finger at Alan and telling him not to get a big head just because her father complimented him. Alan just rolls his eyes and silently wishes the annoying noble girl would go back to her fancy city life. Later that day, the Baron summons Rodan, Gerda, and Alan into his grand reception room. The Baron officially acknowledges their incredible hunting skills and declares that they deserve a massive reward. To Alan's absolute delight, the Baron announces that he is elevating Rodan, Gerda, and their entire families to commoner status. He also extends this promotion to any serf in the village who has participated in the boar hunts for over 10 years. Alan is absolutely ecstatic. He dances around the room, thrilled that his lifelong dream of escaping serfdom has finally come true. As a commoner, he is no longer restricted to the village borders. He instantly starts planning his future adventures, dreaming of traveling to the White Dragon Mountains to hunt legendary dragon. The Baron then asks Rodan to share the history of how the village first started hunting boars, as the king wants to use their village as a shining example for the rest of the country. Rodan remains completely silent, clearly uncomfortable with the topic. Gerda steps up and offers to tell the story instead. He explains that 13 years ago, the serfs were working hard to clear the forest and establish the village. Right before winter, a massive wild boar attacked their settlement and destroyed almost all of their food reserves. Facing starvation, Rodan bravely rallied the men to hunt the beast using nothing but their farming tools. Through sheer determination, they managed to kill the monster and save the village. However, they tragically lost a close friend during the battle. Gerda explains that Rodan still blames himself for that death, which is why he always goes out of his way to protect others. The Baron is deeply moved by the tragic but heroic story. He praises Rodan for his past bravery and offers him one final personal reward, telling him to ask for anything he desires. Alan eagerly hopes his father will ask for something simple, like a large supply of liquor. Instead, Rodan shocks everyone by asking the Baron to take Alan back to the estate and give him a job. Rodan explains that Alan is incredibly smart and would be a massive asset to the noble family. Alan completely panics internally. Working for a noble is the exact opposite of his dream. He wants to be a free adventurer, not a servant bound by strict rules. He desperately tries to think of a way out of the situation. The Baron considers the request and decides that a simple job like a hallboy is not fitting for someone of Alan's intelligence. Instead, the Baron officially appoints Alan as his personal manservant. Cecil absolutely loses her mind upon hearing this. She screams at her father, completely disgusted by the idea of having a former serf living in their noble household. The butler quickly reminds her that Alan is technically a commoner now, but Cecil remains furious. Meanwhile, Alan is sweating bullets and desperately trying to formulate an excuse to reject the offer. However, before he can speak, his father reaches out and gently pats him on the head. Alan looks up and sees Rodan crying tears of absolute joy, incredibly proud that his son has secured such a prestigious position. Seeing his father's genuine happiness completely shatters Alan's resolve. He realizes he cannot possibly break his father's heart by refusing the job. Defeated, Alan bows his head and officially accepts the position, silently mourning the death of his adventurous dreams. A few days later, the time comes for Alan to leave the village. His mother, Teresia, helped him put on his brand new black and green suit. She smiles warmly, but holds back tears, incredibly proud of the young man he has become. Alan walks out of his rustic wooden house and finds the entire village gathered to see him off. Krina runs up to him holding her wooden training sword. She challenges him to one final duel before he leaves. Alan happily accepts and declares himself the manservant of Baron Granbell, while Krina proudly calls herself the Sword Lord. They clash their wooden swords in the middle of a grassy field. Krina attacks with fierce determination, swinging her weapon with incredible power. The villagers watch in awe as the two kids battle intensely. However, Alan quickly realizes he needs to go all out if he wants to win. He opens his magical grimoire and consumes almost all of his stored magic stones to generate 20 copies of his low-ranked bird summon. He applies all 20 stat buffs directly to his agility, granting him explosive, superhuman speed. He dashes across the field faster than the eye can see, completely overwhelming Krina. With a swift and powerful strike, he disarms her and wins the duel. Krina is completely shocked, realizing she actually lost a fight. However, Alan smiles warmly and tells her that they should consider it a draw. He promises that they will settle the score properly when they meet again in the future. Hearing this, Krina's sadness vanishes and she smiles brightly, promising to win their next encounter. After the duel, Alan says his final goodbyes to his family. Teresia hugs him tightly, holding baby Miula in her arms. She tells Alan to take good care of himself and to come back home if things ever get too tough. Alan tells his younger brother Mash to stop crying and to step up as the man of the house to protect their mother and sister. Matilda, Krina's mother, also wishes him well, feeling incredibly sad to see the boy she helped deliver leave the village. Just as Alan is about to walk away, Dagora comes running up to the wooden fence. He clumsily trips and falls, making everyone laugh, but he quickly gets back up. Dagora hands Alan a beautiful small dagger in an orange sheath as a parting gift. Alan is genuinely surprised and touched by the generous present. He thanks Dagora and places the dagger in his bag. With his goodbyes complete, Alan walks toward the village gates, waving to the cheering villagers one last time. He approaches the Baron's red carriage, which is guarded by Xenoff and the Royal Knights. Rodan watches from a distance, filled with pride as his son embarks on a completely new journey. Alan steps into the fancy carriage and takes his seat. As the knights ride forward, the massive wooden gates of the village slowly close behind them. Alan looks out the carriage window, watching the familiar lush green trees and the bright blue sky pass by. He sheds a single tear, whispering a final goodbye to the only home he has ever known, fully prepared to face whatever challenges await him in the noble estate. Alan begins his new life as a manservant at the Granville estate. He immediately has to deal with the Baron's spoiled daughter Cecil. She forces him to act as her personal footstool so she can reach a yellow fruit on a tree in the garden. She climbs onto his shoulders and pulls his hair. She finally grabs the fruit and takes a bite. She spits it out immediately because it tastes gross. She complains that high-growing fruits are sour and orders Alan to go to the market. She wants him to buy her a sweet popo fruit instead. Alan agrees to her demands. While looking up into the sky, he notices a massive flying vehicle. Cecil mocks him for not knowing what a magic ship is. Alan realizes this world has advanced magical technology powered by magic stones. He then heads to the market to run her errands. The next morning, Alan wakes up in his small rustic servant room. He feels incredibly happy to sleep in a real bed compared to his past life living in internet cafes. He uses his summon ability to create glowing green plants and absorbs their energy to check his stats. After getting ready, he heads down to the dining hall for breakfast. He sits with the head servant Rickle and asks about the different servant ranks in the household. Rickle explains that higher-ranking servants like butlers and valets are treated well. Lower-ranking servants like manservants and maids are also officially considered part of the noble family. Alan realizes this is why his father was crying tears of joy when he got the job. However, temporary helpers like hallboys do not get this family status. Later that evening, Alan stands by the dining table to serve dinner to the Granville family. The family consists of the Baron, his wife Cecil, and her younger brother Thomas. Alan notices that their food is surprisingly simple for nobles. The Baron praises Alan for learning his servant duties so quickly. He also compliments Alan on having excellent manners for a former serf. Cecil immediately gets jealous of the praise and tries to insult Alan. She brags about possessing a 2-star wizardess talent. She also mentions her older brother Mihai has a swordsman talent. She mocks Alan for having no talent at all. The Baron quickly scolds Cecil for bragging about her abilities. Hearing all this talk about talents makes Thomas start crying. He does not have a talent either, so he cannot attend the prestigious Academy City like his older brother. Instead, he has to go to the regular nobles' college in the royal capital. The Baron tries to cheer Thomas up. He tells Thomas that he also lacked a talent and attended the nobles' college. He explains that going there is how he met his wife and started their family. He tells Thomas he should not feel bad about his path. Cecil apologizes for making her brother cry. The next day, Alan gets the afternoon off from his duties. He decides to explore the bustling city and is amazed by the massive stone buildings and busy market stalls. He eventually finds the Adventurer Guild and rushes inside. He walks right up to the receptionist and asks to register as a monster hunter. The receptionist asks his age and he proudly tells her he is 8 years old. She smiles and tells him that he needs to be at least 12 years old to become an official adventurer. Alan feels crushed by this news. He refuses to give up on his dream of hunting monsters, so he walks over to the quest bulletin board to gather information instead. He looks at the bounty posters for various creatures like goblins, horned rabbits, and orcs. A tall muscular adventurer with blue hair and a facial scar named Raven walks over. He tells Alan that the guild is not a playground. Alan apologizes but quickly asks Raven how the monster ranking system works. Raven gets slightly annoyed but explains the system anyway. He says the monster ranks get higher the further away they are from the town. Alan looks at a bounty for a B-rank wolf monster called a murder garsh. He asks why nobody has killed it. Raven explains that the beast is incredibly fast and deadly. The adventurers leave it for the royal knights to handle. Alan then points to an A-rank white dragon poster with a massive reward of 1,000 gold coins. Raven tells him that the dragon lives in the White Dragon Mountains. It guards huge deposits of valuable mithril ore. The reward keeps going up because people want to mine the mithril. The dragon is simply too powerful for anyone to defeat, so the bounty remains unclaimed. A silver-haired girl in red armor and a pink-haired healer walk over to fetch Raven. They tell him they finished cashing in their bounties and want to go to the pub. Raven introduces his party members as Rita and Milsey before telling Alan to go home. Alan thanks Raven for the information and leaves the guild feeling fully prepared for his next goal. That night, Alan runs through the foggy city streets with a massive smile on his face. He approaches the large stone fortress gates leading out of the city. The armored guard stops him and asks for a travel permit. Alan pulls out his silver family crest medal. The medal proves he belongs to the Granbell household. The guard immediately apologizes and signals the others to open the heavy gates. Alan runs out into the dark wilderness completely thrilled to finally start fighting monsters. He travels deep into the forest until he reaches the 10-kilometer mark to find D-rank enemies. He opens his magical book and summons a black hawk named Hawkins. He checks the bird's stats and sees it has high intelligence. He orders Hawkins to take a step to the right. The bird obeys perfectly. Alan then summons 5 more hawks. He commands them to use their Hawkeye skill to scout the area for monsters. Next, he summons a yellow saber-toothed cat named Tama. He tries to give Tama a complex order. The beast just rolls onto its back. Alan realizes Tama only has an intelligence stat of 28. It cannot understand detailed commands. Suddenly, Hawkins returns and signals that it found a group of monsters. Alan follows the bird and hides behind a large tree. He spots a group of 5 muscular green goblins armed with swords and clubs. He decides to test his combat efficiency and summons 10 saber-toothed cats. He commands them to attack the goblins. The cats leap forward and strike the monsters. The goblins easily block the attacks with their weapon. Alan realizes the cats are not strong enough to win on their own. He decides to test out a new summon. He summons a massive, colorful butterfly named Papillon. The butterfly flies over the goblins and scatters glowing yellow powder all over them. The goblins immediately close their eyes and fall fast asleep on the ground. Alan realizes the sleep debuff works perfectly. He walks over to the sleeping goblins and kills them easily with his dagger. He absorbs their magic stones and earns 1,000 experience points for the quick victory. He decides that farming large groups of weak goblins is much more efficient than fighting stronger solo monsters. He commands his birds to find more goblin groups within a 3-kilometer radius. He spends the entire night hunting down goblins and horned rabbits. By the end of the night, he defeats 80 goblins and 5 rabbits. He earns massive amounts of experience and levels up twice. He feels incredibly proud of his progress. He also analyzes his battle data and concludes that the butterfly's sleep powder has an 80% success rate against goblins. He notes that low-rank magic stones cannot be used to summon higher-rank creatures. He must manage his resources carefully moving forward. He decides to head back home but realizes he is completely lost in the dark woods. He tries to get his birds to guide him. He discovers they cannot see at night. He eventually finds his way back to the estate miraculously. 1 month later, Alan visits a local weapon shop. He buys 3 heavy black iron balls from the shopkeeper for 60 silver coins. He wants to use them as throwing weapons to deal more damage during his hunts. He is now level 12 and has been secretly leaving the estate to grind experience. He collects better gear just like a hardcore gamer. Later that evening, Alan returns to the estate and walks into a dimly lit hallway. The head butler Sebas surprises him with a candle. Sebas tells him that the Baron wants to speak with him immediately. Alan follows Sebas into the Baron's grand office. The Baron sits behind his large wooden desk. He praises Alan for doing an excellent job as a manservant over the past 2 months. However, the Baron then asks Alan what he has been doing on his days off. He reveals that he knows Alan leaves the estate early in the morning and returns late at night. Alan quickly comes up with a lie to cover his tracks. He tells the Baron about hunting monsters in the forest. He claims that hunting simply runs in his blood because he is the son of Rodan the boar hunter. The Baron believes the story and completely understands. He assumes Alan is only hunting weak E-rank horned rabbit. The Baron orders Alan to stop selling the rabbit meat to the local butchers. He explains it might cause a scandal for the noble family. Instead, he offers to have the Granville estate purchase all the meat directly from Alan for 1 silver coin per bundle. Alan is absolutely thrilled by this arrangement. He can now hunt openly and make extra money at the same time. 6 months pass by. Alan sits inside a hollowed tree trunk in a misty forest eating an apple and reading a book. He plans to hunt at least 100 goblins today. Suddenly, his hawk summons fly down and start acting very frantic. They ignore his commands and quickly fly away into the deep woods. Alan realizes they are moving way past the 3-kilometer limit he set for them. He runs after the birds and eventually reaches a dark forest clearing. He is shocked to find Raven and his adventurer party fighting for their lives against a horde of goblins. Raven lies bleeding on the ground with a massive abdominal wound. Rita tries to hold off the goblins with her daggers. Milsey desperately tries to heal Raven but cries that she is completely out of magical energy. Alan realizes Raven will die if he does not intervene. He pulls out his new iron balls and throws them at the goblins. The iron balls do not deal enough damage to kill them. He decides to enter the fight directly. He tells Rita to handle 1 goblin while he takes care of the rest. 2 muscular goblins charge at Alan with their weapon. Alan easily dodges their attacks and parries their strikes with his small dagger. His attack and agility stats are incredibly high because he is level 12 and heavily buffed by his active summons. He moves with lightning speed and effortlessly slashes the goblins to pieces. After defeating the monsters, he walks over to the dying Raven. He pulls out a glowing green leaf of life that he created using his plant summons. He presses the leaf against Raven's massive stomach wound. The wound glows brightly and heals completely in seconds. He then uses another leaf to heal a deep scratch on Rita's leg. Rita and Milsey are absolutely stunned by the powerful healing item. They recognize Alan from the Adventurer Guild and thank him profusely for saving their lives. Raven sits up and promises to pay Alan whatever he wants as a reward. Alan declines the money and says he needs to get back to his farming. He asks them to keep his identity a strict secret. He changes his mind and asks Raven to gather 100 E-rank magic stones for him within a week. Raven is confused by the simple request but happily agrees to collect them. Alan wades goodbye and disappears back into the forest. Later that day, Alan sits on a tree branch and analyzes the healing properties of the Leaf of Life. He compares it to the Mullerze flower that his father used in the past. He concludes that the flower heals a percentage of total health, while the leaf heals a fixed amount of health points. He also checks his experience log. He realizes he only earned 80% of the normal experience points for killing the goblins during the rescue. He figures out that experience points are not evenly divided when fighting in a party. Alan then summons Hawkins to confront the bird about disobeying his orders. He demands to know why the hawk ignored the boundary limit. The bird looks down sadly. Alan realizes the bird is actually sapient and has its own feelings. It sensed that Raven's party was in deadly danger and chose to lead Alan to them to save their lives. Alan feels bad for yelling and apologizes to the bird. He tells Hawkins that he is very proud to have such a smart and caring creature on his team. Sometime later, Alan is back at the Granville estate performing his servant duties. He helps Cecil in the dark storage pantry. Cecil sits on his shoulders once again so she can reach a glass jar of jam on the top shelf. She complains that Alan is terrible at balancing her. Alan jokingly asks his bird to dump her in a lake. He asks Cecil why she even needs the jam in the first place. Cecil happily explains that she wants to bake sweet jam cookies for her older brother Mihai. He is returning home from the Academy City next spring. Suddenly, Hawkins flies down and pecks Alan on the head. Alan loses his balance completely. He and Cecil scream as they crash down onto the hard wooden floor, sending jars tumbling everywhere. A guard standing outside the mansion hears the loud crash from the pantry. He assumes a stray cat knocked something over and goes right back to sleep. Late December arrives, and 8-year-old Alan stands by the table to serve dinner to the Granville family. The Baron enjoys the meal, but Alan knows they are just eating horned rabbit meat instead of their usual great boar. Cecil mentions that a neighboring village successfully met their hunting quota for great boars and complains that her family does not get to eat any of it. Alan explains that the king personally ordered all the extra boar meat to be sent to the royal capital for the winter festivities. Thomas gets extremely upset about missing out on his favorite seasonal meal. Cecil decides to test Alan and demands that he hunt a white deer for them instead. Thomas argues that hunting a C-rank monster is way too dangerous, but the Baron finds the idea amusing and allows it. Alan confidently accepts the challenge because he loves testing his combat abilities and wants to grind more experience points. He heads out into the snowy mountains the next day to track down the beast. He uses his summoned birds to locate a massive white deer with glowing antlers resting in the forest. Knowing he cannot defeat the giant creature in a straightforward battle, Alan summons his hopper squad consisting of 4 colorful frogs. He commands the frogs to continuously spam their provoke skill to grab the deer's attention. The massive beast becomes enraged and chases the small frogs relentlessly, while Alan safely stays out of sight. He uses this mechanic to kite the monster all the way out of the forest and straight back to the Granville estate. The giant deer crashes right into the stone courtyard, terrifying the local guards who immediately point their spears at it. Alan casually steps out from behind the beast and tells the shocked family that he brought the white deer for Thomas, just like he promised. Everyone is absolutely blown away by his success, and the Baron happily anticipates serving the rare meat for the new year. However, the head butler Sabas secretly talks to the Baron and expresses his deep suspicions. They both find it completely impossible that an 8-year-old boy without any talent could take down a C-rank monster so easily, and the Baron orders Sabas to investigate Alan further. Later that day, the Baron calls Alan into his office to offer him an official promotion. He makes Alan the family's designated huntsman and tasks him with protecting the townsfolk from monster attacks. He also offers Alan a monthly salary of 100 silver coins, which completely doubles his current pay. Alan is absolutely thrilled because he can now hunt monsters and farm experience points legally without having to sneak out of the estate at night. However, the Baron quickly crushes his dreams by stating that he still has to work as Cecil's manservant and wait tables every day. Alan realizes he will only have time to hunt on his designated days off, but he hides his disappointment and formally accepts the new position. Months pass and spring eventually arrives. Alan stands in the town square with Cecil and the rest of the family to welcome back the eldest son, Mihai. A massive magical airship floats into the station from the sky. Alan marvels at the advanced magical technology and wonders exactly what keeps the heavy ship afloat. Mihai steps off the ship and immediately hugs his younger sister. He hands Cecil a green butterfly souvenir that he bought in the royal capital, and she promises to treasure it forever. Mihai then notices Alan and praises him for becoming a manservant at such a remarkably young age. Alan plays the part of a humble servant and credits all of his success to Cecil's gracious favor. Mihai finds Alan incredibly mature and asks him to carry his luggage back to the estate. A few days later, Alan hunts down a massive, colorful rooster monster and brings it to the estate's head chef. The chef is amazed by the huge haul and mentions that Mihai is currently sparring with the master knight Zenoff out in the courtyard. Alan rushes over to watch the fight. He is highly impressed by Mihai's swordsmanship, as the young noble easily holds his own against the veteran knight. Once the match finishes, Cecil spots Alan and immediately volunteers him to spar with her older brother. Zenoff hands Alan a high-quality mithril sword for the duel. Alan feels incredibly confident because he has been grinding monsters every single week and recently reached level 20. He checks his stats and sees his attack and agility numbers are massive, so he genuinely thinks he can win the fight. The duel begins and Alan rushes forward to strike. His attacks hit incredibly hard, but Mihai effortlessly dodges and parries every single blow without breaking a sweat. Alan tries to use his maximum speed to overwhelm him, but he quickly realizes Mihai is completely out of his league. Mihai swings his blade with blinding speed and points his sword right at Alan's face, forcing him to surrender instantly. Alan is completely shocked by the massive power gap between them. Mihai explains that he spent his entire summer clearing a deadly monster dungeon and training under a legendary sword lord at the academy. Alan realizes that people with real combat talents progress on an entirely different scale. He figures that talented nobles get to play on normal mode while he is stuck grinding for his life on hell mode. Mihai asks Alan to keep taking good care of Cecil before leaving for the academy again. Alan secretly vows to find a way to quit his servant job so he can focus entirely on leveling up and becoming stronger. By early April, Viscount Cornell travels from his neighboring territory to visit the Granville estate. The Baron serves him the fake boar meat for dinner. Cornell happily eats the horned rabbit while blatantly mocking the Baron. Cornell brags loudly about his youngest daughter taking the appraisal ceremony and turning out completely talentless. Alan is totally confused by this interaction because all the commoners he knows celebrate whenever they receive a talent. Rickle pulls Alan aside to give him a quick history lesson about the region. He explains that the White Dragon Mountains separate the two noble territories. The mountains are filled with highly valuable mithril ore, but a massive white dragon constantly nests there. The dragon violently switches sides every 100 years. Right now, it lives on the Granville side, completely ruining their mining economy and plunging their territory into poverty. Cornell is the one who snitched to the king about the boar meat just to make the Granville family suffer even more. Rickle then explains the concept of the noble's duty. If a noble child gets a combat talent, they are legally forced to fight on the front lines against deadly monsters and usually end up dying very young. Cornell is thrilled. His daughter has no talent because she gets to stay home and live a safe life. The Baron's children all have combat talents except for Thomas, meaning they are destined for brutal warfare. Alan finally understands that being a talented noble is basically a terrifying death sentence. Several months pass, and by early October, Alan turns 9 years old and gets a day off from his servant duties. He goes straight to the local tavern to meet up with Raven, Rita, and Milsey. He tells them he has successfully killed over 10,000 goblins and needs to start hunting C-rank monsters to get better experience points. The veteran adventurers are completely stunned by his kill count but warn him that C-rank monsters can easily slaughter grown men. They decide to help him gear up before he gets himself killed. They take him to a local armor shop to find some better equipment. Rita tries to make him wear a bright pink skirt as a joke, but Milsey steps in and finds a powerful red cloak with a black spiderweb design. She explains that the cloak provides excellent defense without restricting his movement during combat. Alan buys the gear and runs straight into the deep forest to begin his hunt. He checks his stats and sees he is now level 24. His enhanced skill has reached level 5, which heavily buffs all of his summoned creatures. He sends his birds to scout the area and quickly locates a sleeping C-rank orc leaning against a tree. Alan summons his pack of saber-toothed cats and orders them to attack. The cats rush forward and tear the orc to shreds before it can even wake up to fight back. Alan easily harvests its magic stone and scores 1,500 experience points. He is absolutely thrilled to finally farm C-rank monsters without relying on complicated traps. He continues his hunt deeper into the rocky valley and soon stumbles upon a C-rank armored ant. The giant insect features thick gray armor and razor-sharp red pincers. Alan sends his cats to attack it, but their sharp claws bounce right off the ant's steel-like shell without leaving a single scratch. Alan panics and quickly changes his strategy. He summons a swarm of papillon butterflies and commands them to drop their glowing sleep powder all over the giant ant. The powder works perfectly, and the monster falls completely asleep. Alan jumps onto the massive insect's stomach and tries to stab it with his dagger to extract the magic stone. His blade cannot pierce the armor at all. He screams in absolute frustration and repeatedly stabs the shell with all his strength, but he makes zero progress. He realizes physical attacks are completely useless against this specific monster. He opens his status menu and notices his intelligence stat is currently sitting at a massive 855 points. He figures with an intelligence stat that high, he must be able to cast powerful destructive magic to melt the thick armor away. Alan immediately abandons the hunt and returns to the city to find answers. He brings Cecil along with him to visit an elderly magic professor at a local facility. The professor features a long white beard and wears an eye patch. Alan urgently asks the professor to test his magical aptitude so he can finally learn how to cast spells and defeat armored monsters. The professor places a light blue crystal ball on the table and tells Alan to simply hold his hands over it. He explains that if the ball glows, Alan possesses the ability to use magic. Alan focuses all of his massive stats and energy into his hands. He strains his body trying to force the magic out, but the crystal ball remains completely dark and lifeless. The professor casually informs him that he has absolutely zero aptitude for magic and cannot cast a single spell. Cecil smiles smugly and reminds Alan that nobody can use magic without a specific talent for it. Alan stares blankly at the crystal ball in utter shock. He realizes his massive intelligence stat is completely meaningless for spellcasting. He curses his terrible fate and realizes the summoner class is completely broken and horribly unbalanced. Despite his frustration over his complete lack of magical aptitude, Alan doesn't have much time to dwell on the unfairness of his class because a panicked guardsman suddenly bursts into the room with terrifying news. A B-rank monster known as a murder gauche is heading straight for the city and will reach the south gate in less than 2 hours. Baron Granbell immediately asks about the whereabouts of his captain, Xenof, but the guardsman explains that the captain and his entire knight squadron are away on a monster hunt and won't return for another 2 days. Realizing the city is completely defenseless, the Baron urgently orders his men to contact the Adventurers Guild so they can protect the city and evacuate the citizens as quickly as possible. Hearing this, Alan steps up and declares that he will help fend off the beast. Cecil furiously objects to this idea, yelling at Alan that a manservant has no business fighting such a dangerous monster and forbidding him from abandoning his post. However, Alan remains completely resolute and respectfully reminds her that he is also the Granbell family's official huntsman. He checks the local bounty board and confirms that the murder gauche is a terrifying B-rank threat with a massive bounty of 200 gold coins. He knows perfectly well that the local adventurers stand absolutely no chance against a monster of this caliber. To make matters even worse, Alan checks his status board and realizes he completely depleted his mana earlier that morning while farming experience points for his skills, leaving him with zero magic power for the upcoming fight. He desperately hopes his mana will recover in time as he watches a massive crowd of terrified citizens and wagons rush through the heavy stone gates to seek shelter inside the castle courtyard. The guards scramble to close the gates just as the towering Murdergolsh finally arrives, but a panicked father begs them to hold off because his wife and daughter are still stuck in a carriage outside the walls. The massive blue fur-covered beast, boasting terrifying claws and a twisted mask-like face, gleefully attacks the stranded carriage while the guards watch in sheer terror. Knowing he has to act immediately, Alan sprints out into the open field and throws a rock directly at the monster's bleeding eye socket to grab its attention. The beast furiously turns its gaze toward Alan, completely abandoning the carriage. A guardsman screams at Alan to run away, calling him crazy for taunting the monster, but Alan boldly insults the ugly beast and easily lures it away from the city gates. He decides to make himself the ultimate bait, leading the furious monster on a wild chase toward the distant White Dragon Mountains. The Murdergolsh relentlessly hunts him through the dense forest, smashing trees and hurling giant boulders at him as Alan desperately dodges for his life. He checks his status board again while running, completely frustrated that his mana still hasn't regenerated. Eventually, he trips and falls in a sunlit clearing, allowing the massive beast to completely corner him. The Murdergolsh looms over him with a terrifying grin, but instead of finishing him off, it just laughs and toys with him. Right at that exact moment, Alan's mana finally fully restores to 954 points. He compares the monster's playful behavior to a turn-based RPG, giving him a free turn, and immediately seizes the opportunity. He summons a swarm of mechanical butterflies, specifically allocating all of his buffs into agility and endurance so he can survive the encounter. He commands the butterflies to unleash their glowing sleep powder all over the monster, hoping to knock it out completely. However, the debuff has absolutely no effect on the giant beast, and Alan quickly realizes the Murdergolsh either possesses high status resistance or his current skills simply aren't strong enough to affect a B-rank threat. Seeing the monster prepare another massive strike, Alan panics and summons several more creatures to distract it before running off into the woods again. The chase continues relentlessly for 3 grueling days and nights as Alan burns through all of his hoarded magic stones just to stay one step ahead of the beast. He eventually manages to lose the monster deep in the mountains and drags his exhausted body all the way back to the safety of the fortress. 3 days later, Alan finally wakes up in a comfortable bed with Cecil standing right beside him. She furiously yells at him for making her worry so much, but her eyes are completely filled with tears of relief. Baron Granville soon calls Alan into his office to officially thank him for his incredible bravery. The Baron explains that by luring the monster away during the night's absence, Alan successfully kept the city's casualties to an absolute minimum. As a reward for his heroic actions, the Baron gifts him 10 gold coins from the Granville family and an additional 10 gold coins from the family he saved in the carriage. Alan is absolutely ecstatic about the massive payout because 20 gold coins is a total fortune. He immediately heads to the local shops and drops 25 gold coins on a brand new mithril sword. He ventures out into the forest to test his new weapon on some giant insects, thrilled to see the blade cut through them like butter. However, he quickly realizes that while the mithril sword is incredibly sharp, it still doesn't possess the sheer piercing power needed to break through heavy monster armor. Taking a break from hunting, Alan decides to spend the rest of the day thoroughly experimenting with his summoning mechanics. He sets up a clever test with his summoned hawks to figure out how their intelligence and memory systems actually work. He places several different items inside a bag and quizzes the birds to see if they know what's inside. Through a series of extensive tests, he discovers that newly created copies of a summon completely synchronize their knowledge with the rest of the flock, meaning they instantly know everything the previous summons learned. However, already active summons cannot update their information on the fly. This massive revelation leads Alan to realize that his summoned beasts are essentially immortal learning machines that will continuously evolve and retain knowledge as long as he stays alive. Time eventually flies by, and by early March, Alan is 9 years old and significantly stronger. He stands in the estate courtyard engaged in an intense sparring match with Cecil's older brother Mihai, who has returned from the academy for a visit. Despite Alan having farmed a couple thousand C-rank monsters and reaching level 28, Mihai easily disarms him and sends his sword spinning into the sky. Cecil cheers wildly for her brother while Alan simply groans in frustration. He completely admits defeat, loudly complaining that the academy must provide ridiculous experience point multipliers for its students. Mihai humbly thanks Alan for the match, but Xenoph praises Mihai's incredible swordsmanship, noting how much his academy training has paid off. Just as they finish their duel, a frantic knight bursts into the courtyard with massive news for the Baron. He reports that the legendary White Dragon, an A-rank monster worth 1,000 gold coins, has officially migrated away from their territory and moved straight into the carnal fiefdom. The Baron absolutely erupts with joy, realizing that after a century of waiting, his family can finally reclaim the mithril mines and bring massive wealth back to their impoverished land. He immediately orders Xenoph to have the knights secure the mines and clear out all the dangerous monster burrows at the base of the mountains. Alan eagerly volunteers to help the knights clear the monsters, hoping to score a ton of free experience points. But Xenoph firmly denies his request. The captain explains that the area is swarming with high-ranking orcs and goblins, and it would be far too dangerous for Alan to tag along, especially if the White Dragon randomly decides to return. Mihai agrees and tells Alan to just stay home and focus on his schoolwork. Alan retreats to the forest completely annoyed, realizing the knights are going to steal all of his best hunting grounds and ruin his experience point farming route. Determined not to fall behind, he opens his massive black status book to review his current build. He notes that his summon, create, fuse, and enhance skills have all hit level 5, and his expansion skill has reached level 4, granting him 50 whole inventory slots. More importantly, he recently unlocked a brand new skill simply called Share. Curious about its effects, he summons a hawk and activates the Share skill. Instantly, his left eye glows bright red, and his vision violently shifts to the sky. He is completely blown away to discover he is looking through the hawk's eyes, experiencing a massive aerial view of the surrounding forest and distant mountains. He quickly realizes he can completely control the bird's movements and even utilize its special abilities remotely. Overjoyed by this discovery, he compares the ability to multiboxing in a video game, a tactic where a solo player controls multiple characters at once to absolutely dominate the game. Wanting to push his limits, he summons 4 more hawks and activates Share on all of them simultaneously. His brain manages to handle 5 distinct points of view, but when he tries to add a 6th summon to the network, he gets hit with a blinding headache and collapses against a tree. After canceling the skill to stop the pain, he deduces that his ability to control multiple summons is directly tied to his intelligence stat. Since his intelligence is currently sitting at over 1100, he figures he gets 1 extra shared vision slot for every 200 points of intelligence. To test this theory, he quickly creates and summons a bunch of his newly unlocked D-rank bird creatures, which grant him massive intelligence buffs. His stat skyrockets to over 1200, and he successfully connects to 6 summons at once without any pain. Feeling incredibly confident, he decides to summon the rest of his brand new D-rank creatures to see what they can do. A giant gray bear, a massive blue spider, an armored fish, a golden knight, and a weird little potato creature materialize in the forest around him. Alan notices that almost all of these D-rank summons start with over 100 intelligence, meaning they can easily understand his complex commands. He immediately forms a plan to hunt monsters using nothing but his summons via telecommand. He spots a C-rank armored pillbug monster nearby and orders his squad to attack. The giant spider shoots a thick web that completely binds the heavily armored bug, allowing the massive bear to leap forward and crush it with a devastating physical attack. The armored fish uses a spray ability that drastically buffs the entire party's evasion rate. Then, Alan commands the little potato creature to use its special skill, Crop of Magic. Instantly, Alan's mana bar surges, recovering a massive 1000 magic points. He screams in absolute joy, completely thrilled to finally possess an actual mana recovery item in this ridiculously difficult world. With his ultimate farming team finally assembled, Alan sets up a flawless system. He uses his birds to constantly scout for enemies from the sky, the fish to keep evasion buffs active, the spider to permanently debuff targets, and the bear to act as his main attacker. He calculates that with all his new buffs active, his intelligence will sit at a massive 1600, allowing him to effortlessly control 8 summons simultaneously. He orders his monster squad to grind experience points out in the wild 24 hours a day, specifically warning them to avoid human adventurers at all costs so they don't cause a panic. With his new automated farming setup perfectly established, Alan uses his flying summons to travel vast distances and spy on his old friends back in his home village. He watches happily through his bird's eyes as Krenna, Dagora, and Mash practice their combat skills with wooden weapons in the town square. Knowing his friends and family are doing well, Alan uses his summon to quietly drop a shiny gold coin on their windowsill under the cover of night, completely satisfied with his new life as a telecommand summoner and fully prepared to conquer the world. In October, Baron Granvelle meets with Captain Xenoph in a formal room to discuss the current status of the local mining operations. Xenoph delivers grim news, reporting that the mines and the surrounding refinery villages are now completely infested with highly dangerous orcs and goblins after sitting abandoned for so long. The Baron points out that Viscount Carnell recently tried to push his own mining operations forward, only to provoke the wrath of the White Dragon, which instantly incinerated all of his miners. Realizing his rival's operations are now completely shut down, the Baron aggressively urges Xenoph to get their closest mine operational as quickly as possible to boost the local economy. Xenoph warns that clearing out the monsters will take at least 3 years, which deeply frustrates the impatient Baron, but they both agree they must proceed with extreme caution. Meanwhile, Alan secretly eavesdrops on the entire meeting while serving drinks to the family. He realizes the knights are finally preparing to mobilize and exterminate the local monster population. Having spent the last 6 months secretly reconnoitering the area and leveling up, Alan decides he needs to act incredibly fast. He plans to leave the Granvelle estate to become a registered adventurer the moment he turns 12, but for the next 2 years, he intends to steal all the valuable experience points before the knights can wipe out the monsters themselves. Alan immediately heads out into the dense forest to completely eradicate a massive goblin fort. He summons his powerful bear beasts, affectionately calling them his Teddy Squadron, and sends them charging straight into the wooden enclosure. He strategically plans to leave the goblin spawn points completely intact, utilizing his old video game tactics to farm experience points indefinitely from the same location. However, knowing these specific goblins actively hunt and consume innocent humans, he quickly changes his mind and decides it is much safer to wipe them off the map entirely. He summons a giant blue and black spider to shoot thick streams of yellow webbing, completely trapping the goblin archers on their watchtowers and locking down their primary defenses. His bear squadron ruthlessly steamrolls the remaining goblin forces, trapping them inside the burning camp with absolutely no way to escape. Soon, the giant goblin king emerges from a large tent, wearing a gold crown and a spiked necklace while wielding a heavy weapon. Alan completely ignores the boss's intimidating presence, fully confident because his summons have easily defeated thousands of C-rank monsters by this point. One of his large gray bears easily overpowers and executes the Goblin King, granting Alan over 4,000 experience points from that single kill. He checks his floating black status book and happily confirms he racked up nearly 50,000 experience points from the entire raid. Pleased with the massive payout, Alan plans to systematically wipe out every goblin burrow scattered around the surrounding forest before eventually targeting the much stronger orc settlements. Time passes, and the new year arrives in March. Alan turns 10 years old, meaning the system's strict age restriction on his stats is finally lifted, allowing him to completely utilize his full level 34 power. He excitedly reviews his stats, noting he has amassed dozens of D-rank summon copies across various categories and is currently at his absolute strongest. At the Granvelle estate courtyard, the family happily celebrates the return of Mihai, the Baron's eldest son and Cecil's older brother. Mihai arrives carrying his heavy luggage, having just officially graduated from the academy. Cecil is absolutely thrilled to have her brother living with them again, but the joyful reunion is quickly interrupted when Mihai formally challenges Alan to a no-holds-barred duel on the estate lawn. Alan eagerly accepts the challenge, determined to test his newly unlocked stats against the 15-year-old academy graduate. The Baron and his wife watch closely from the sidelines as the intense match begins. Alan immediately utilizes his massive agility boost, darting rapidly across the grass and launching a flurry of heavy strikes with his glowing blue sword. However, Mihai effortlessly anticipates every single attack, calmly parrying Alan's massive swings with his own silver blade. Alan quickly realizes that his raw speed advantage means absolutely nothing against Mihai's superior sword mastery skill and overwhelmingly high attack power. No matter how hard Alan pushes the offensive, he cannot throw Mihai off balance. The fierce duel ends quickly with Mihai easily disarming Alan, forcing the young boy to drop to his knees and admit total defeat. Alan mentally calculates his stat distribution, wondering if he needs to reallocate his buffs to increase his attack power, while Mihai warmly praises his incredible strength and skill for his age. Cecil happily suggests that Mihai should start giving Alan advanced sword lessons now that he is back, but Mihai suddenly drops a massive bombshell on the entire family. He solemnly announces that he must leave the estate the very next day to undertake the noble's duty. Cecil and her parents are completely shocked by the sudden departure. Cecil begs him to stay, completely devastated to learn that this mysterious duty will keep him away from home for at least 3 years. Alan watches the highly emotional scene unfold, noting the somber atmosphere and realizing that the Baron likely knew this day was coming all along. He suspects this ominous noble's duty is the exact reason why the Baron originally promoted a young commoner to the dangerous position of official huntsman. Before leaving the next morning, Mihai shares a quiet moment with his distressed sister, promising to return safely in 3 years. He then approaches Alan near the carriage, firmly grabbing the boy's head and heavily making him swear to protect Cecil no matter what happens. Alan quickly agrees, sensing a strange tremble in Mihai's hands just before the young noble boards the red and black carriage and rides off to fulfill his deadly obligation. By May, Alan successfully reaches level 35 after completely eradicating every single goblin nest in the entire region. Feeling highly confident in his massive stat boosts, he decides it is finally time to conquer the massive local orc burrow. He marches straight into the dense forest with a giant army of summons, including heavily armored golden knights to act as defensive shields, giant bears for brutal physical attacks, and flying birds for aerial support. The orc forces quickly notice the intrusion and launch massive volleys of arrows from their wooden watchtowers. Alan calmly stands behind his golden knight summons, letting their massive shields easily block every single incoming projectile. Since he cannot actually see his summons' health bars, he worries about them taking too much hidden damage, so he quickly adapts his strategy by summoning his giant spiders to trap the orc archers in thick yellow webbing. With the enemy's ranged attacks completely neutralized, Alan eagerly commands his bear squadron to aggressively charge the settlement. Hundreds of muscular, spear-wielding orcs rush out to meet them, clashing violently with the bears in a massive cloud of dust. Alan excitedly watches his experience points skyrocket as his forces slowly overwhelm the standard orc infantry. However, the chaotic battle suddenly takes a terrifying turn when a massive burst of pink magical energy detonates right in the middle of his formation. Alan is entirely shocked to witness real magic for the very first time, quickly realizing the devastating blast came from a group of dark, cloaked magic orcs standing on a distant rocky ridge. The magical artillery completely bypasses his shield knights, severely devastating his rear guard. Furious, Alan pulls out heavy steel spheres and uses his throw skill to instantly kill several of the magic orcs from a distance. The remaining magic orcs quickly retreat out of his throwing range, forcing Alan into a brutal war of attrition. He continuously summons fresh waves of bears and relies heavily on his hoarded mana recovery items to sustain the relentless assault against the overwhelming numbers. Just as the tide finally begins to turn in his favor, the massive orc king aggressively steps onto the battlefield. The towering B-rank boss monster wears a spiked red and black fur cloak and wields a gigantic battle axe. It unleashes a devastating shockwave that instantly vaporizes multiple bear summons in a single hit. Alan panics, rapidly summoning and enhancing more beasts, but the Orc King effortlessly cuts them all down before they can even land a scratch. To make matters significantly worse, the remaining magic orcs launch another massive pink energy sphere directly at Alan, completely engulfing his primary shield knight and destroying his entire defensive line. Exhausted, injured, and covered in dirt, Alan slumps against a burning wooden structure, completely out of mana and surrounded by deadly enemies. Just as he prepares to accept his absolute defeat, Captain Zenov suddenly steps into the clearing. The heavily scarred, white-haired knight casually approaches the massive Orc King, confidently ordering his vice captain, Leybrand, to handle the magic orcs. Alan watches in sheer awe as Zenov blocks the giant monster's incredibly heavy axe strikes with a simple glowing sword, effortlessly parrying the massive B-rank threat without even breaking a sweat. Meanwhile, Leybrand leaps high into the air and unleashes a massive shockwave of blue energy, instantly wiping out the entire squad of magic orcs on the cliff. Zenov then delivers a swift, lethal slash directly across the Orc King's chest, instantly killing the massive beast without ever relying on an extra skill. Later that night, Alan shares roasted meat on skewers with Zenov by a glowing campfire in the dark forest. Zenov calmly reveals that he knows perfectly well Alan is the one who has been secretly wiping out the monster burrows and harvesting their magic stones over the last few months. He correctly deduces that the strange beasts fighting alongside the boy are the direct result of his unique talent. Caught entirely red-handed, Alan nervously admits to hunting the monsters but strictly refuses to elaborate on his connection to the gods or the true nature of his summoning mechanics. Zenov promises to keep Alan's secret completely hidden from the Baron, but only on the strict condition that Alan regularly reports his hunting progress to the knights so their operations do not overlap. Alan readily agrees to the deal, secretly amazed that Zenov has survived enough brutal battles to accumulate so many permanent scars across his back. Over the next 2 weeks, Alan heavily refines his combat strategy based on his failures. He successfully raids another orc burrow entirely on his own, earning a massive 335,000 experience points from the victory. He perfects a highly efficient system of overwhelming the enemy with 40 bear summons from all sides before immediately targeting the magic orcs, ensuring he can comfortably defeat the Orc King without taking any personal damage. Fast forward to September, a royal messenger suddenly arrives at the Granville estate, completely disrupting the peaceful atmosphere. The messenger coldly presents the Baron with a stack of papers containing Mihai's personal diary entries from the military barracks. He bluntly announces that Mihai dutifully carried out his assigned mission but was killed in action. The entire family is completely devastated by the horrific news. The Baron furiously lashes out at the royal envoys, aggressively accusing them of treating his son like expendable fodder just because they are lower-ranking nobles. He fiercely points out that Mihai was fresh out of the academy and never should have been sent on such a deadly assignment after only 6 months. The messengers coldly ignore his anger and simply excuse themselves to deliver more death notices to other families. Cecil sits slumped at the table crying uncontrollably over the loss of her beloved brother. Looking on with a deeply worried expression, Alan suddenly remembers how strangely Mihai acted before he left, realizing the young noble likely knew he was marching straight to his death. Desperate for answers, Cecil forcefully demands to know the truth about this mysterious duty, but the Baron immediately orders Alan, the maids, and the other servants to clear the room so he can speak with his daughter privately. Alan waits anxiously in the hallway, listening to the muffled conversation through the thick wooden door. He overhears Cecil furiously yelling at her father, completely appalled by the revelation that the so-called noble's duty essentially forces young aristocrats to sacrifice their lives for the kingdom. Before the Baron can calm her down, Cecil bursts out of the room in tears and sprints down the hallway, completely ignoring her father's desperate pleas. Alan discusses the tragic situation with another servant in the dining hall, learning that the Baron's own parents and elder brother also died at very young ages due to this exact same brutal obligation. Suddenly, a panicked maid runs through the courtyard screaming that Cecil has gone completely missing. Alan runs outside and realizes she dangerously climbed out of her bedroom window and fled the estate grounds. Feeling a deep sense of responsibility, Alan remembers his final promise to Mihai to keep Cecil safe no matter what. He tightly clenches his fists, vowing to scour the entire area and find the heartbroken girl before she does something completely reckless. Following Mihai's tragic death, a flashback reveals an exhausted Cecil wandering through a dark cobblestone alleyway at night. She leans against a stone wall, crying over her inability to surpass her late brother's strength and confessing her absolute terror of dying. Alan finds her and offers her some bread and spiky fruit to eat. As she sobs, Alan casually suggests they run away together, abandon her family, and travel the world as registered adventurers to completely avoid the deadly noble's duty. Cecil immediately rejects the idea, calling him crazy because she is expected to enroll in the academy next year. Alan reminds her that it is her life and she should choose how to live it, prompting Cecil to decide she wants to return home. She demands a piggyback ride because her legs hurt, and Alan obediently carries her through the dark streets back to the manor. Upon arriving, Baron Granville rushes out to hug his daughter and tries to ease her fears. He promises that once the mithril mines are fully operational, he will gift the mining rights to the royal family to purchase an official exemption for her, completely freeing her from the noble's duty. However, Cecil fiercely rejects this easy way out. To prove her resolve, she engages in a brutal mock battle with an ice magic instructor in the courtyard. She vows to stop running from her responsibilities and swears to follow in Mihai's exact footsteps to become a strong warrior. Time jumps forward to March, making Alan 11 years old. The Granville fiefdom has returned to normal over the past 6 months, largely because Alan secretly exterminated all the local orc burrows by himself to grind for experience points. Inside the manor, the Baron and Captain Xenoph discuss their plans to resettle the mithril refineries and resume full mining operations by the summer. Their only lingering concern is the suspicious lack of aggression from their rival, Viscount Carnell, who lost his own mining access. Meanwhile, Alan ventures high into the snowy White Dragon Mountains alone, noting that the Baron strictly forbade Cecil from joining him on these dangerous hunts. Alan's current goal is to clear out a massive nest of armored ants to ensure the safety of the incoming mithril miners. He locates the cave entrance and estimates there are over 1,000 soldier ants and a powerful queen inside. Knowing the narrow entrance prevents a full-scale invasion, he summons a diverse team of beasts, including a giant spider, a flying fish, and his fierce bear squadron to thin the enemy numbers. 1 month passes, and an exhausted Alan realizes he has slaughtered over 2,000 ants without making any real progress. He returns for another month of relentless grinding, racking up over 5,000 kills, but the endless stream of bug monsters completely blocks him from entering the nest. He deduces that the queen must be eating the corpses of the fallen ants to rapidly lay new eggs. Changing his strategy, Alan summons a white owl and uses a vision-sharing skill to scout the dark, maze-like tunnels without putting himself in danger. His first owl flies deep into the cavern but gets ambushed and killed by a giant mechanical spider. Unfazed, Alan summons a second owl and successfully navigates the complex labyrinth, eventually discovering a massive underground chamber filled with thousands of glowing green eggs. Deciding it is time to finish the job, Alan pushes into the deep cavern and finally confronts the queen armored ant, a gigantic white segmented monster with a black ant head. He holds up his lantern and immediately orders his bear squadron to attack the smaller soldier ants first. The bears rush forward, intercepting the rolling spherical ants and tossing them aside. Alan then summons a massive worm creature with purple spots and a pack of black dog beasts to assist in the chaotic melee. The dogs viciously tear into the black ant monsters, instantly turning them into blue dust. Alan spots an opening and commands his bears to attack the queen directly. The bears leap onto the massive white bug and bite ferociously into its soft flesh. The queen screeches in absolute agony as glowing streaks of light erupt from her body. The giant bug finally succumbs to the massive damage and completely disintegrates into a large cloud of blue dust. Alan checks his system notifications and happily confirms he gained 45,000 experience points from the boss kill. Since it is far too late to travel back to town, he camps overnight in the dark cave with his bear summons. Before leaving, he harvests a massive cluster of blue mithril crystals and the queen's orange exoskeleton as undeniable proof of his victory. The next day, Alan returns to the manor and presents the rare items to the Baron, Xenof, and Cecil in the courtyard. They are initially highly skeptical of his story until he shows them the pure mithril ore. The Baron is absolutely astounded and confirms Alan has discovered a brand new, highly lucrative mithril vein. As a reward for his incredible find, the Baron officially grants Alan a 30% stake in the future mining operations. Alan happily accepts, realizing this deal will secure him a massive fortune over the coming years. By October, Alan turns 12 years old and continues working as a server in the manor's busy kitchen. Despite his newfound wealth and safety, he feels incredibly bored with the comfortable lifestyle and desperately misses the thrill of hardcore combat. His mundane routine is shattered when a royal messenger suddenly arrives alongside the rival lord, Viscount Carnell. Sensing serious trouble, Alan eavesdrops on their meeting in the dining room. The pale royal messenger presents a legally binding contract dictating that the Granville and Carnell fiefdoms must co-manage the White Dragon Mountains and split all mithril profits equally to ensure economic stability for both regions. Carnell acts incredibly smug, revealing he has already signed the document. The Baron slams his hand on the table in pure outrage, furious that Carnell expects half the profits after contributing absolutely nothing to clearing the dangerous mines. However, the Baron quickly realizes he is trapped, knowing that refusing the royal order would make his family look greedy and treasonous. Desperate to stall for time, the Baron claims the decision is too important to rush, and announces he will visit the royal capital to appraise the situation as soon as Xenof returns from his patrol in 2 days. Carnell angrily accuses the Baron of being blinded by greed and violently storms out of the room. Back in the kitchen, Alan discusses the dire political trap with the head chef, agreeing that Carnell will definitely stab them in the back. Suddenly, a loud commotion breaks out on the upper floors. Alan rushes up the grand staircase and finds a servant lying dead in the hallway next to a massive hole blown straight through the manor's wall. He sees 3 armed intruders holding Cecil hostage. Alan instantly summons his glowing blue sword and aggressively charges at the leader, a muscular blonde man wearing an eye patch. The eye patch man swings a massive broadsword, easily blocking Alan's heavy strikes with overwhelming force. Alan realizes the enemy's attack power is incredibly high and quickly opens his floating status book to switch his summon cards for a better matchup. However, before Alan can execute his new strategy, the eye patch man easily overpowers him and knocks him completely unconscious. Sometime later, Alan wakes up to find himself tightly bound with thick ropes in a dark storage room. He sees Cecil lying right next to him, still unconscious and gagged with white bandages. The 3 kidnappers sit on wooden crates nearby, casually discussing their plan to sell Alan as a slave to make some quick money. Suddenly, their boss, a pale man with white hair and fangs named Dagra, enters the room. Dagra violently punches the red bandana kidnapper in the stomach for making unauthorized plans and sternly warns the group that he is the one calling the shots. He orders his men to kill Alan immediately if the boy causes any trouble and then walks out. The remaining kidnappers nervously discuss Dagra's terrifying reputation. noting he is a ruthless war veteran whose combat skills rival Captain Xenop's abilities. Realizing he dropped his mithril sword during the earlier fight, Alan quietly assesses his limited options. He knows summoners can still fight effectively as long as their vision is not obscured. He secretly uses his floating book to summon a small, colorful bird behind some metal bars. He activates his vision-sharing skill and sends the bird out of the storage room to scout an escape route. The bird flies through the metal corridors and discovers they are not in a simple warehouse, but actually aboard a massive, luxurious flying magic airship high above the clouds. The bird continues exploring and flies into a lavish wood-paneled lounge with a large geometric window showing the starry night sky. Inside, Alan spies Viscount Carnell drinking red wine and laughing with the royal messenger. Alan listens closely as Carnell brags about orchestrating the entire kidnapping to force the Baron to surrender the valuable mining rights. Carnell coldly states that he already sent a threatening letter to the Baron, and if Granvelle still refuses to sign the contract, he will chop off Cecil's hand and mail it to him as a final warning. Furious at this incredibly dirty tactic, Alan immediately cuts the vision sharing and focuses his attention back on his physical surroundings in the storage room. The kidnappers notice that Cecil is waking up and cruel mock her. The eye patch man threatens to kick her repeatedly until she learns to obey them. Knowing time is running out, Alan decides to act instantly. He quickly reallocates his character stats, optimizing his build specifically for player versus player combat. He opens his interface and summons a massive, glowing butterfly named Papillon. A brilliant flash of white light fills the dark room as the large insect materializes. Before the kidnappers can react to the sudden intrusion, Alan commands the butterfly to release a thick, swirling cloud of glowing yellow sleep powder. The dense magical sparkles quickly envelop the three men. The eye patch man looks around in total confusion just before the powerful sleep effect takes hold, instantly incapacitating him and his two accomplices. With the kidnappers completely passed out on the floor and the immediate threat neutralized, Alan breaks free from his restraints and prepares to launch his full counterattack to save Cecil. Alan wastes absolutely no time and immediately summons his magical beasts to deal with the incapacitated kidnappers. He calls out his glowing blue knight, a giant bear with red markings, and a large black and yellow spider, and together, they easily overpower the remaining thugs in the storage room. Alan rushes forward and delivers a brutal punch to the stomach of the eye patch-wearing leader, sending him crashing backward through several wooden crates. With the enemies handled, Alan approaches Cecil and quickly removes the thick ropes binding her. Suddenly, a pale man with white hair, yellow eyes, and a snake tattoo on his neck appears. He is Dagra, the ruthless leader of the kidnappers. Before Alan can react, Dagra moves with blinding speed and kicks Alan squarely in the stomach, launching him straight through a concrete wall into an adjacent dark storage area. Alan realizes Dagra must be using an incredibly fast movement skill. Dagra arrogantly mocks Alan, asking if the kid has never seen a combat skill before. Knowing he cannot win a direct fight, Alan commands his mechanical spider to shoot a thick yellow web, successfully wrapping up Dagra's arms and torso to stall him. Alan quickly orders his blue knight to block the broken doorway while he grabs the unconscious Cecil. He finds a small golden-framed window and looks out, realizing they are on a massive flying airship over 100 meters in the air. Having no other choice, Alan opens his system interface and quickly shifts his stat points, dumping everything into endurance and agility to survive the fall. He tells Cecil they have to jump, grabs her tightly, and leaps out the window onto the back of a giant black insect summon. The insect flies them away from the ship, but they eventually crash hard onto a dark, debris-filled stone runway. The brutal impact breaks Alan's legs, but he grits his teeth through the immense pain and uses a glowing green leaf of life to completely heal his injuries and restore Cecil. Cecil suddenly wakes up, totally panicked and confused about the monsters and the fact that they just jumped out of a flying ship. Alan tells her to keep quiet and hold on tight because Dagra will undoubtedly chase them. He puts her on his back and summons his glowing blue bird and several large gray owls to scout the area from above. Up on the airship, Viscount Carnell is furious about the escape, but Dagra confidently uses his tracking skill to follow Alan's footprints through the city. Through his shared vision with the owls, Alan notices Dagra sprinting after them. To counter the tracking, Alan starts zigzagging wildly across the city's stone rooftops, intentionally messing up his trail to buy them some time. They successfully lose Dagra for the moment, and Alan informs Cecil that they are heading toward the northern Granvelle fiefdom border checkpoint. Realizing Dagra will eventually find their tracks again, Alan changes his strategy. He summons several golden armored knights holding large circular plates above their heads. Alan jumps across these floating shields through the air, ensuring they leave absolutely no footprints on the ground. They travel deep into the forest and set up a safe campsite surrounded by the night summons. While resting under a blanket, Cecil asks Alan why he kept such an amazing summoning ability a secret from everyone. Alan simply explains that nothing good ever comes from making his powers public knowledge. The next morning, Dagra figures out that Alan is traveling through the air and changes his search tactic, forcing Alan to keep moving fast. After a day and a half of constant travel, they finally reach the Granville checkpoint at sunset. The armored guards immediately recognize Cecil and offer to prepare a carriage for her return. However, Alan checks his shared vision and sees Dagra rapidly approaching. Knowing the small group of checkpoint guards stands absolutely no chance against someone as powerful as Dagra, Alan decides it is safer to run right past the fortress and keep carrying Cecil into the wilderness. Cecil feels incredibly guilty about being a burden and begs Alan to leave her behind so he can save himself. Alan firmly refuses, smiling as he reminds her that he made a promise to her late brother Mihai to always keep her safe, and he fully intends to keep that promise. As they run deeper into the dark forest, a massive blue monster with white fur, black claws, and a single glowing red eye suddenly blocks their path. Alan instantly recognizes it as the Murdergulch, a terrifying beast he fought 3 years ago. Now trapped between Dagra coming from behind and the beast in front, Alan decides he has to kill the Murdergulch immediately. He summons his mechanical spiders and orders them to shoot sticky yellow silk at the monster, then sends his bear squadron to swarm and bite its flesh. The Murdergulch roars in anger, easily breaking free from the silk and sending the bears flying across the clearing. The beast lunges forward and scoops Alan up in its massive clawed hands. Cecil watches in sheer horror from behind a rock as the monster sadistically grins and squeezes Alan. The beast opens its massive jaws and tosses Alan inside, seemingly eating him alive. However, the Murdergulch suddenly stops and starts violently vomiting blood. Inside the monster's mouth, Alan reveals that he swapped all his system buffs to HP and endurance right before getting caught. Surviving the crush, Alan drives a small dagger straight into the monster's glowing red eye and unleashes a massive surge of yellow electricity, completely frying the beast from the inside out. The Murdergulch collapses onto the rocky ground and dissolves into blue dust, rewarding Alan with a massive 82,000 experience points. Cecil runs over with tears in her eyes and hugs him tightly, incredibly relieved he survived. Unfortunately, their victory is cut short when Dagra finally tracks them down in the clearing. Knowing how dangerous the assassin is, Alan tells Cecil to run away while he stays to fight. But Alan is completely out of weapons and his mana is drained. Dagra mocks Alan for trying to play the brave warrior and brutally kicks him in the stomach, sending him flying across the dirt path. As Alan lies bleeding on the ground, Dagra draws his uniquely shaped glowing blue sword and prepares to execute him with a fiery strike. Suddenly, Cecil jumps out and casts a massive yellow fireball directly at Dagra. The spell hits, but Dagra barely flinches. He walks right through the smoke and slaps Cecil hard across the face, sending her crashing to the forest floor. Seeing Cecil hurt sends Alan into an absolute fury. He lunges at Dagra with everything he has, but his attack completely fails and he collapses back into the dirt, coughing up blood. Dagra prepares to deal the final blow, but Alan suddenly smirks and hits him with a blue energy blade. Alan reveals that the moment they cross the border, he sent his bird summon to fetch Captain Xenoph. Right on cue, Captain Xenoph arrives in the clearing, fully decked out in his red and white high-collared armor. Dagra goes on an angry rant, screaming about how much he despises knights because their incompetence got his old war buddies killed, and he charges fiercely at Xenoph. Xenoph calmly states that he also lost all his comrades but refuses to let a scumbag criminal dishonor their memory. Xenoph activates his extra skill, Aura Blade, causing a swirling purple and pink mist to erupt from his body. With a single devastating swing, Xenoph unleashes a massive shockwave that carves a deep trench through the forest and completely obliterates Dagra. Alan watches from the ground, completely blown away by the sheer destructive power of the Sword Master class. Following the intense rescue, the group safely returns to the Granville estate. The entire family and household staff rush out to the courtyard, tearfully embracing Cecil and thanking Alan for his heroic efforts. Later, inside the manor's green-walled dining room, the Baron holds a serious meeting with Alan and his advisors. The Baron is furious about the kidnapping and plans to immediately travel to the capital to report Viscount Carnell to the king. Alan steps in and firmly advises the Baron against relying purely on the king's sense of justice, warning that the royal messenger will likely escape any real punishment. Instead, Alan offers to return his highly valuable mithril mining rights back to the Baron so they can be used as a massive political bribe for the royal family. The Baron is initially outraged at the idea of bribing the royals, but Alan argues that real men must be willing to do the dirty work to protect their families. Realizing Alan makes a valid point, the Baron swallows his pride and agrees to use the mining rights as a bargaining chip. The ruthless political maneuver works perfectly, resulting in Viscount Cornell facing justice and his entire fiefdom being absorbed by the crown. Sometime later, as a special reward for their bravery, the Baron allows Alan and Cecil to attend a highly classified lecture regarding the noble's duty. An old historian with an eye patch shows them a detailed world map and explains the true, hidden history of their world. He reveals that 112 years ago, the Demon Lord of the End appeared on the central continent and demanded total surrender. When the nations refused, the Great Calamity occurred, causing every single monster in the world to instantly rank up in power. The Demon Lord's monstrous army wiped out 4 entire countries in just 4 years, pushing humanity, the Dwarven Empire of Bocus, and the Elven continent to the brink of total annihilation. The surviving nations formed the 5-Continent Alliance and created academies to train anyone born with a special talent. The historian then tells them about Helmios, a young man born with the unprecedented hero talent, who single-handedly pushed the demons back and reclaimed lost territories. Hearing this lore, Alan opens his system interface and sees that both the Demon Lord and the hero are listed as 5-star difficulty classes. He realizes these 2 specific talents dictate the fate of the entire world. The old man then drops the hardest truth. He explains that the noble's duty is actually a mandatory 3-year military conscription for any noble born with a talent, and the casualty rate on the front lines is brutally high, claiming half of all recruits. This dark revelation makes Alan finally understand the true purpose of his frontier village and why the Baron requested so much boar meat to support the endless war effort. In November, after Alan turns 12, the Baron calls him into the library for a private meeting. The Baron hands Alan 3 brown pouches containing 600 gold coins, explaining it covers the Murdergausch bounty and a personal reward for saving his daughter. He then painfully admits that his desperate request to exempt Cecil from the military conscription was flatly rejected by the king because her wizardess talent is considered far too valuable to the war effort. With no other options, the Baron begs Alan to accompany Cecil to the academy and act as her personal bodyguard on the battlefield. Alan confidently agrees to the mission and finally reveals his secret class to the Baron, stating that he is a summoner who gains unrivaled power through trials. The Baron is shocked but incredibly relieved to hear this. Alan refuses to take all the gold and instead proposes a new contract. He asks the Baron to use 400 gold coins to permanently abolish the head tax for his own family and Krina's family. The Baron agrees instantly. Alan then requests to officially resign from his position as a manservant so he can operate independently while still providing security for Cecil. The Baron agrees to this as well and reveals that thanks to the massive mithril deal, he has been officially promoted to Viscount. He presents Alan with an ornate decorative sword featuring a black hilt and gold patterns, declaring him an honored guest of the Granbell family who will always have their full political backing. As Alan holds the sword, he reflects on his entire journey over the past 12 years. He realizes that being born as a lowly serf, fighting boars in the mud, and working his way up through the Baron's service were all necessary steps to acquire the skills and position needed to survive this world. He understands that the god Elmea deliberately placed him in this brutal hell mode because the world needed a hardcore gamer willing to grind relentlessly to defeat the Demon Lord and restore the broken balance. Filled with absolute determination, Alan fully accepts his ultimate quest and vows to protect Cecil while taking down the Demon Lord's army once and for all.